Mic check 1 2 1 2. I am in here, man. Happy Monday to everybody. What's up with everybody, man? Hope everybody's weekend was incredible. We got some very interesting weather here in Atlanta. It was cool the other day. Now it's sunny. Now it's warm. All of those things, man. We got a lot to cover today. Mass Appeal is rolling out a whole lot on us. It's very mysterious. 7 acts. People are speculating on what the acts are, or who the acts are. But regardless, we're going to get some great new music. So I'm excited about that. I did want to start the show off, though, talking about Tribe. People's Instinctive. People's Instinctive celebrated 35 years the other day. And People's Instinctive launched on the release date was actually on Q-Tip's 20th birthday. So he celebrated a birthday at the same time. But I went back and listened to People's Instinctive, and I think it's important that I speak on this just a little bit because Ron Vay and I are actually working on a piece about the low end theory. So we're going to handle the production side of the low end theory, which, that is something that I love to talk about any given day. But going back, listening to People's Instinctive, which for me, and I've said this on this channel before, you guys can mute. I've said that on this channel before. It's my personal favorite Tribe album. Now, is it the best Tribe album? No, many people put People's Instinctive as third best. But for me, it really shows you a lot about Tribe, Q-Tip, and their ability to step in the game one way and totally change another way. Now, one thing that I hold Tribe and Q-Tip extremely high for is the fact that this is a self-produced album. And now that I know, Q-Tip produced this album himself. And not only did he produce this album himself, he was basically a solo act on this album. Phife had 4 verses on this project, on this debut album, to be respectfully so. So Q-Tip held down a lot of it as an MC on his own, as a frontman on his own. And when you listen to People's Instinctive, it sounds drastically different than the rest of the Tribe efforts. And different to me in a great way. Like me and my homie Brandon, we talk about how important young energy, or as we call it, young nigga energy in hip hop is. And to me, I think that People's Instinctive is indicative of what young energy is supposed to sound like or feel like in hip hop. I kind of liken it to TLC's first album, right? Like that album is just young, jubilant, and it's not their best effort, but it's something special about it. And that's how I feel about People's Instinctive. It's drastically different than the rest of the Tribe efforts. And I give Q-Tip a whole lot of credit. Number one, as an 18, 19-year-old producing your debut album with not a lot of OGs around you to see the production side of it. And you knocked it out the park. Footprints is incredible. You listen to these songs now, though, they don't have that feel that we know Tribe for, that hallmark sound that we know Tribe for. And that's why when we cover Low End Theory, that's going to be important. But it was just spellbinding to me, the fact that this 19, 20-year-old made People's Instinctive. And then when he saw that, okay, well, we're supposed to be a group, supposed to be a collective, he went out there and produced the Low End Theory, which really got Phife a lot more involved, and they really became a group then. But saying all that to say, man, People's Instinctive is an incredible piece of work. I think it's noteworthy that it is the first album to get 5 mics in the source. That along with, I want to say it was it America's Most? Those two were the first 2 to get 5 mics in the source. And it got 5 mics on the fact that it was original, it was new, it had an energy to it, and we didn't even know the beginnings of what Tribe was able to actually do. And yeah, People's Instinctive is a great listen. If someone's being introduced to a Tribe Called Quest, it's funny. I would have them listen to that album third. I would have them listen to the Low End Theory first, have them listen to Midnight Marauder second, and then this one. And People's Instinctive is a very interesting classic. It's probably not going to be on most people's classic board, but it's an incredible moment. Shout out to everybody in the room. Thumbs up in the chat. Savon, we in here, man. I know I was having an issue hearing you earlier. You in there?
Yo, you can hear me?
I hear you perfectly, man. How you doing?
I'm good. How you doing?
Yes, sir. I'm all right, man. You know what I'm saying? It was a cool weekend, chill weekend. It was a lot going on with Coachella. It was cool to see a lot of people really showing up artist wise. And it seemed like it was a good energy out there. Anybody in the chat, y'all make it out to Coachella this year? I want to see because we need to get somebody on that actually went. It felt like it had an energy that it hadn't had in a minute. You know what I'm saying? Queen
Yeah, man.
Latifah joined Megan Thee Stallion on stage, performed UNITY. But we're gonna get to the Coachella talk. Kendrick Lamar's Damn celebrates 15 years today. I'm sorry, not 15 years. What am I talking about? 8 years. Hadn't been that long. Damn celebrates 8 years today, and I remember Damn being incredibly important for me because it was right after To Pimp a Butterfly, and usually third time's the charm for sure. And I know, he had Section 80 and Overly Dedicated. But if we're starting at Good Kid, Mad City, and then we're going into Pimp a Butterfly, I feel like Damn is where he was able to kind of split the difference, right? I feel like Good Kid, Mad City, it's heralded on most circles as a classic, right? Everybody got it. Everybody understood it. The impact was there right away. I liken it to like a Get Rich or Die Trying type of album. To Pimp a Butterfly is one of those albums, either you think it's brilliant or you think it's mid. So, it's one of those things. And I think Damn is where he kind of was able to do a little bit of both. You know what I mean? Like, I felt like Damn is very on the surface, but if I'm being honest, man, like as far as mic performance, I feel like it's one of his most impressive mic performances from end to end on the album. And I think he continued to separate himself on Damn, and that was the album where we really start having these talks about him being, the one. What do you remember about Damn when it got released?
I didn't know how to feel about it at first because like the records that were coming out were like more so mainstream appealing album.
Right.
And, I don't know if the Black Panther soundtrack was before this or afterward. I think it was
It
before.
was after. It
It
was
was
after.
after. It was after.
Hmm.
Okay. So like my expectations, I didn't really have any from this coming off to Pimp a Butterfly, but I know like when I heard the mainstream sounding records, I was like, mm, I don't
I
know if
didn't
I'm
like Humble
gonna go,
first. I
but
still really don't love Humble, but everything else on there, I was
no,
like, when I
it's a
heard,
great album. But I'm
yeah,
saying like when I first heard that and that's the record, I was like, I didn't have any expectations when I heard that first single. I was like, I'm wondering where the direction of this is going. But then I heard the joint with Rihanna, and I was like, okay. But when the album actually dropped, I was like, this probably is the most digestible album he has, because Kendrick is like a acquired taste to people. So I was like, if there's any record that you want to introduce people to him off of, just like a casual hip hop fan, I would take him to Damn because it's like more digestible. It has like those radio friendly records or those bigger mainstream records on it, and then I'll introduce him to like a Good Kid, Mad City instead of doing it in reverse for the casual listener. I know that may sound crazy because Good Kid, Mad City is such a great album, but like I said, digestible. If a casual fan, I think to introduce them to this, then that'll be that. But yeah, man, I don't know. I think when I first heard this album, it took me like two listens to really get the story because I didn't get the story at first. I was just listening to the music,
yeah.
and
It's always a story in
yeah,
Kendrick's, projects.
yeah. So it took me two times to listen to it to get the story. But yeah, man, solid album, solid effort. I don't have a problem with this album at all. I think I think it was a great approach for a third album. A lot of
Uh-huh.
people, these days in hip hop, artists are averaging just 2 to 3 albums and they phase out. And that he found another way to be creative and re-energize his base. I think it was something dope. So yeah, it doesn't even seem like it's been that long since it's been out, but here we are.
Yeah, man, that's crazy, man. 8 years, man. My favorite song on there was Phil. Still is probably. I did love Loyalty. I think Loyalty was a dope single. I also love Love. DNA was hard. Element was hard. I
Yeah, I
love
love El.
Fear. Duckworth. Like I
Mhm.
go back to Damn. I listened to that album, and it's. I will say this, production wise, I think he really found his own sound on there. Like this is 2017, right? It doesn't really sound like production wise what is going on in hip hop in 2017, with the exception of Humble, and that's Mike Will made, of course. But it's like he found his own sound and his own lane, him and Soundwave, and it was, it just sounded like them. It's hard to explain it. It didn't sound like anything else that was going on at the time, but he created his own lane and own avenue with that album. And to me, I think that's the one he got the Pulitzer Prize for.
Mhm.
Now, many people, associate an award like that with, To Pimp a Butterfly, what its sentiments are, but it's it's Damn that got it. Now, I think he got it because of the writing on there, and he's always a great writer when it comes to his projects. Even Mr. Morale, some great writing on there. But as far as clicking as an MC, and like you said, being very palatable with it, I think Damn's where you go. And he doesn't do all those, vocal inflections that some people love and some people hate on Damn too much either. It's not like a lot of different personalities on there. He just spit. And yeah, I think the Damn was the moment where many of us who were in denial about his all-time greatness were like, yo, man, this guy, when it's all said and done, maybe top 15, top 10 all time. Um, there was some Israelite gaslighting on there, Mad Max. I will give you that. As far as some of those sentiments, I really, wasn't super fond of. But again, that's his perspective. I love the fact that he puts his perspective out there. Super's in the building.
What's good, man?
Super said, "Damn, it's the last physical CD he bought." Wow. What's the last physical CD you bought, man? Because I don't even remember, man.
The last physical CD I bought was Watch the Throne.
Wow. I
Yeah.
feel like the last physical CD I bought might have been like U2's Number Ones or something. I'm trying to remember the last physical rap CD I bought.
Yeah, the
Huh.
last one for me was Watch the Throne. I remember the day.
It
Me and
might
my dog.
this might get
Yeah.
embarrassing, man. I think the last physical rap CD I can remember buying, I could be mistaken. It might be Rhythm and Gangster from Snoop. Far as
Damn.
CD. Yeah, it's been a minute. I mean, we've been on these MP3s and streaming platforms for a minute. Because any other
Yeah.
CDs that I might have bought, it might have been like some retro stuff where it was like I was going back getting stuff. But as far as like new CDs, huh? I don't know, man. Maybe the Carter 3. I don't know. I think it might have been Rhythm and Gangster. That's crazy. And
Yeah.
I know that Leroy said he's still getting CDs, man. I ain't got no CD player. I don't know what I could play. Like, none of my devices got any CD ports. I guess I could play it on, like, say Xbox or something. But yeah, it's
I
really
don't.
different.
I got a bunch of old CDs, and I used to be on a LimeWire putting crazy viruses on my mom's computer
Oh, yeah.
as a
Yeah.
teenager. And then when I was grown, I was like, hey man, once we got to the MP3 era, it was like, hey man, CDs became a thing of the past. We was on and then we get into the mixtape era, yeah, it definitely became a further thing into the past.
Before we get on to 50 Cent and Ja and Nas and Master Pill, how would you rank Damn amongst Kendrick Lamar's catalog?
I'll put it I'll put it third.
I got third too. Jermaine Johnson with the super chat says, "Damn is what made me say to myself, oh shit, not only is this a dope album, but this guy is intentional in making sure that every album sounds completely different from each other. Then Mr. Morale, and then G and X. Yeah, I would have to say, and this is a strong list, man. The top three are extremely strong. Me personally,
Yeah.
I'm gonna go to Number Butterfly number one. I could see somebody saying Good Kid, Mad City number one. Those go either way. Then I would go Good Kid, Mad City, and then I would go Damn. Then I would go Section 80. Then I would go, huh? I got to be honest. I guess I'll say G and X and then Mr. Morale, because I mean G and X got joints on it in ways that I don't feel like Mr. Morale does. I do think the writing is better on Mr. Morale, but he got bops on G and X. It is what it is. I don't think he would have been able to do a Super Bowl halftime with a majority of Mr. Morale songs.
No, not at
So
all.
nah. So yeah, that's my Kendrick order, and I ain't even gonna put in overly dedicated at the moment. Ja Rule 50. How did this
Yeah,
crank
man.
back up? Ja Rule's Breakfast Club interview. Did you see it?
Yeah, I watched the whole thing. It cranked back up,
What are
really,
some?
Well, 50 does a lot of trolling anyway. He trolls Ja every chance he get opportunity. Ja don't really pay attention to it. Sometimes he'll, go back at him. But for the most part, he's just been in his own bubble. But
Mhm.
when Irv Gotti died, he posted, the post saying smoking on that Irv Gotti pack and had been
Right.
trolling that and everything. And um just being disrespectful, and he went on the Breakfast Club, did a good interview, and I thought they were actually going to avoid bringing 50 up because of the subject. It's
Right.
actually kind of getting tired that every time Ja does an interview or anytime he speaks to a platform, they always bring up the 50 stuff. I think at this point, Ja Rule's career kind of stands on his own to where you really don't have to mention 50 if you don't want to. It was a moment, but it's something you don't have to rehash to celebrate or talk about his career for the most part and his accomplishments. But yeah, it basically said
How did
something
it come
about that.
up in the interview then? How did it come up in the
Um,
interview? Do
I
you
don't know who
remember?
remember. I don't remember if it was Envy or if it was Charlemagne, but somebody. I don't even think it was Charlemagne, but somebody
Mhm.
asked him about how he felt about the comments that Ja made that 50 made towards him regarding Irv Gotti, and he said, some things like he would have went nuclear on them, and a couple
Yeah.
more comments. It spilled out on X when he just kind of like just let him have it. And at this point, I'm not really mad at Ja, man.
Yeah.
I'm not mad at Ja because like this is a beef that's never gonna end. But I could truly say Ja is one of those guys that kind of moved on and has moved on for just doing his own thing, and like it's like 50, like he makes it his business to kind of like pick out him, troll out him every opportunity he gets. And it's like it's kind of getting old, man. Like you won this shit, and it's like at what point do you still poke at him and whatever? And like and it brought me to a question, like if this beef would have occurred um in the social media era, will we be looking at Ja Rule different? And I say yes.
How so? And how do you think the social media era would have made what they had going on different?
Because as much as we love Get Rich or Die Trying, now we're older and we know better. We could say there was a lot of influence and a lot of momentum that was on 50's side when he dropped in that whole and what played a role in that whole beef thing. It was like he drops, he has all the momentum in the world. He's under two powerhouses. Ja is the man at the time, but when the beef really hit, you have Murder Inc. that's going through the federal thing, Irv and all of that, and that kind of railroads things, not only financially, but it railroads things as far as what you could say in content. About time Ja Rule really was able to respond musically, it was kind of like the momentum of 50 had already taken over because Clapback wasn't a bad record. Some of the records he released post 50 wasn't bad records, but the momentum and the tide has changed and people switch sides. People that was once Ja Rule fans turned into 50 fans. And then you had the other amount of people that just want to be a part of the winning team, and then you have the media part of it that play a section, and then you have the label politics and stuff and things behind it and everything. And once you know, it just took over. But when you really look at some things that came out later and some things that Ja is saying and some recounts of situations, I wonder where they still be looking at Ja in a certain way, because that's interesting to me that Ja has been looked at as a sucker or looked at as a clown in this situation, when really, if you pay attention to things, it's kind of like, nah, I think we kind of old enough to know how this plays out, and we just gave it to the popular guy at the time, who was going real hard at the time. Um,
I do think
I,
that there are some back and forth, not to interrupt you, but I do think there are some beefs in hip hop that would have been different in the social media era. I think that LL Cool J and Cannabis thing may have went different in the social media era. I think that would have kind of I won't say isolated, but that would have alienated that mainstream hip hop audience that really wasn't, all hard on pause on LL Cool J in the late '90s like that. But it also would have invigorated that underground crowd that felt like Cannabis really did win that battle. Some people sit there and tell you that Cannabis still won that battle, but the mainstream radio and television, they actually determined the outcome of that one. And I think that would have been different in the social media era. Now, as far as the Ja Rule and 50 thing, I don't know, because Kanye said something on one of his tweets the other day that I thought that needed to be talked about as well, where he was talking about how he got all of the support in the building when Graduation came out, when he was going up against 50 on Curtis. And, honestly, when we look at this whole thing, that situation is very similar to the Drake and Kendrick thing, right? As far as like it being a universal thing, because Interscope and Def Jam, they were being distributed by the same distributor at that time. And that momentum was going into Kanye's favor because they wanted Kanye to supersede 50, right? Well, at least that's what, Kanye is saying, right? I do think that at that time, when it came to the 50 Cent Ja Rule thing, there was a concerted effort all around to knock Ja Rule down a peg. And like you said, the federal stuff that was going on with the feds and Irv Gotti, that did not help. Murder Inc., not just Irv Gotti, right? Def Jam really wasn't supporting Murder Inc. in the same way that they were beforehand. And they kind of just left Ja Rule out to dry. And like you said, that hurt his content, probably his confidence. And you know what I'm saying, you got somebody in 50 Cent that's getting support from everywhere. You know what I'm saying? He's getting support from the Midwest, getting support from the West Coast, getting support from New York City. And it was just an onslaught. And unfortunately, the fans fell for, the fact that, okay, Ja Rule's not cool anymore. I remember when it was happening. I'm like, how are people
yeah,
going to sit here and act like they don't like Ja Rule when he's doing something similar to what the guy who's dissing him for singing is doing? And it just
yeah,
shows you how easily the fans could be manipulated in situations like that. And I'm gonna be real. I think we've seen this in the Drake situation too. Like, if you never liked Drake, cool. But it shouldn't take Kendrick Lamar not liking certain things that Drake do to make you feel like, oh man, Drake's not cool anymore. I felt like the same thing happened with the 50 and Ja thing. So I don't know how different it would be in the social media era unless Ja Rule would have come out and really speak to things. I think that people see folks who are super high on something and, not super high on something, but super high in their career that they don't think is all that and it's a little bit overrated. And then when somebody comes in and speaks to that, then everybody kind of just, it just piled it on this individual. And that happened to Ja.
yeah. I mean, as far as the beef, it trickled into this industry shit from real street shit, and I felt like Ja was a
Right.
casualty of that. What happened, behind the scenes with Irv and the story with Preem and all that. But as far as like how you said, man, it's funny how it became uncool for Ja, but 50's like formula in a sense was sort of similar to that. if you look at the Put It On Me video and you look at 21 Questions and how that is, they're sort of fucking similar. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
It's kind of like,
I mean, they're both
and I
from
think
Queens. And they have similar, experiences. They have similar influences. So yeah.
yeah, but the thing with 50 is like he had like some real street momentum and credibility at the time and a real story behind it,
Yeah.
that kind of like took over as far as outside of the appeal as well. But it's just kind of funny how we made Ja like the clown of this all when really like even during the beef and after the beef, it's like this guy is I've every interview I've seen of him, the only corny time when I say where he gets into corny talk in my eyes is when he revisits this 50 conversation. It's like when I look at Benzino interviews and he always talks about Eminem. You know what I'm saying? I hate hearing these guys still have these old conversations of a beef that somebody already won. It's like I can see if it's still ongoing and stuff never end, but to be at this part in career and this old and still be with that shit, it's kind of like, come on, man. But
We got some
I
words from a New Yorker here in Mad Max. It says, "I'm from New York. You capping all my niggas in the grassroots like 50 over Ja because of the mixtapes. Ja was more popular than 50 in the social media era. Once 50 gets shot 9 times, New Yorkers making him a god." And Mad Max also says 50
That's what
sings
you guys
songs
say for me.
with
Y'all should say
he says, Mad Max says 50 singing songs was still hip hop. Ja singing songs was pure R&B pop. Stop it. Okay. All right. Let's explore this. I will say this. I do think that Ja got to a point, and I didn't really love when they made the Grease video. But I do
I
think
don't know.
Ja got to the point where he was doing something different, and it did move away from, I guess, the street aesthetic that he started with, but that's okay. You know what I'm saying? That I think that always happens when somebody gets extremely crossover and makes great commercial radio records. I mean, Ludacris did it. Ja Rule did it. You know what I'm saying? And to some degree, 50 did it as well. I think 50 did a better job of balancing out the street stuff with the
Mhm.
R&B stuff. But again, man, if somebody hit you up and was like, "Yo, let's do this remix with Jennifer Lopez," you're gonna say no. You know what I'm saying? Like all of the people that Ja collabed with and made radio records with, all of our goats have done, similar things. That I mean, Nas made a song with Jennifer Lopez at that time. You know what I mean? And I think what happens with people like Ja Rule and even Nelly, you start listening to the outside noise and you want to change up your formula to get back to the streets or whatever, and those people have already moved on, unfortunately. I'll give Ja Rule a lot of credit because when he came out with Holla Holla, we looked at him as like a DMX Jr. or whatever. And after that, after Vita Vita Vici, his first album, he was able to change things up and find his own sound, his own lane, and he differentiated himself from Jay Z and DMX and everybody else that was on the Hard Knock Life tour. He created a lane for himself, and I get it that somebody like 50 who's incredibly talented that was coming with some dope music, some crazy mixtape street music was dope, but they both could have been dope. I guess what Mad Max is saying, I get it. 50 was on some New York street shit,
But
and
they love the
Ja
character.
was far removed from that. And it was kind of like when DMX came in and Diddy was shiny with the shiny suits and all that, right? And DMX comes in on some hardcore stuff. That's kind of what
Yeah,
50
yeah.
did with Ja. You know what I mean?
But it's really like it's really like the character of 50 that people love. Even the stuff he's doing on social media. It's the character of 50. Yeah, he has real roots. He has real credibility in the streets. But you guys love the imagery of that. You guys love the way he's willing to have no like limits to where he'll go when he have real issues with people. But when people mention stuff like or showing paperwork on the guy and stuff like that, then the same credit doesn't go to the op. You know what I'm saying? I'm like, that's why I say I wonder how that will look in social media when all those stories and the paperwork and all that stuff comes out. Is that something that you still care about now, or we don't caring about? Because all the time people are worrying about who's snitching, who's doing this and who's doing that. I don't know the full details of all that stuff, but that's stuff you have to consider. Like, and even when you look at that, look at the beef of stuff now and how it transpires, and you see how 50 moves and how he carries himself. Can we say that that beef and 50 actually winning that was that good for the trajectory of hip hop from that point on? Because it's like G Unit and 50, and this is just me playing devil's advocate in this conversation. When you look
Mm-hmm.
at 50 and G Unit and they had their moment and that stops, you start to see a transition with New York hip hop. So with that beef going the way that it did, and we looking at it with the eyes of today, can we say the way of how that went, was that good for New York hip hop for the near future? Or if
Well,
we
you
were to
know
say,
what?
yeah,
I got something to say about that. Let me get to some of these super chats. Mad Max says, Nas still made street records, same at 50. Even Drake understands. I still need a 8 a.m. in Charlotte or a 100, 0 to 100. If you leave hip hop, you're done. And you know what? That's what we talk about when it comes to Nicki, as it pertains to Nicki. And I do agree with that, Mad Max. I remember looking at an interview that Russell Simmons did back in the day. He said they made sure when it came to LL Cool J, they were going to have a radio record, and on the B side of that radio record, they would have a street record. And that's why we got the Ashachas and stuff from LL Cool J and things like that in the 4-3-2-1s, even later in his career. Jermaine Johnson with the Super Chat says, he says, Ja and 50 beef changed the trajectory of hip hop. If all New York queens and Ja and 50 collaborated, Atlanta would not have taken over in the mid 2000s. Is that something to the degree of what you're saying, Savan? You talking about that
no,
lack of unity, or are you talking
no,
about the fact
I think
that 50 had the rings and that kind of moved New York hip hop in a negative way?
no, I don't think it would have changed the trajectory of hip hop as far as how the South entered. I think the South was bubbling and that was going to do that regardless. I think it changed the trajectory for New York hip hop. You know,
Well, I'll say this: there was a argument that Ebro and 50 had some years back, where
mm,
50 was blaming Ebro for ruining New York hip hop, and Ebro was blaming 50. And Ebro, being the program director of Hot 97, many people feel that him being from the Bay originally, I think Ebro's from Sac or from San Francisco, somewhere out there in Cali. Y'all correct me in the chat if I'm wrong. And he ended up being the program director at New York's staple hip hop radio station. If people who don't know what the program director does, the title is basically, this is the person that chooses what is on the radio station, right? Or at least is the face of what is chosen to be on the radio station. But anyway, he blamed 50 for New York hip hop falling off because 50 came in the game with so much division and divisiveness with other New York artists. I mean, if you remember, it was Fat Joe, it was, the Lox, it was, obviously Ja Rule, even Diddy to a certain extent. He had beef with Lil' Kim. Everybody in New York for the most part. And at the same time, he was the biggest in New York numerically, and obviously him and Jay always were at odds to some degree. But anyway, and him and Nas really weren't in a great place either. I always felt like that line on Made You Look was about 50 too. But I ain't 5-0, y'all know it's Najo. But anyway, he blames Ebro for the fact that, they didn't support New York artists. And I mean, I think that's a relevant conversation as well. Now, to your point, and saying all that to say, I do think that once 50 got on and did what he did, sonically that changed where New York hip hop was coming from. Now, I will say this, and I'm sure people in the chat are going to highlight this. When 50 got on and got to the height of his powers, he put on Mobb Deep, signed Mobb Deep, signed MOP. Who else did he say? He went back and signed Mace, right? So people could say that he gave back to New York hip hop in that way, but I do think that what his success showed was the fact that you kind of got to go outside of New York to be the biggest in New York now. And 50 had like a southern drawl, southern slang. That's because of the the bullet in his mouth. But he was working with West Coast producers, and you know what I'm saying, he was signed to a Midwest label technically. You know what I'm saying? Shady Records is Midwest, and so I think that does kind of dilute, that New York. What we knew of as quote unquote New York hip hop. Because when you listen to 50, yeah, it is New York hip hop from the mixtape stuff and the B sides, but the singles don't scream New York hip hop, honestly. Matt back to the super chat says New York hip hop is always beefed, and that's what we do. Okay. But all right, I get you, Mad Max, but to someone else's point, when you have a whole nother region that's unified and is collaborating with each other, it's going to be very difficult for New York to really compete with the South, who was just not only making bangers, but actually working together and not beefing with each other outside of Flip and Tip. Matt Max with the super chat says the South was always going to take over. They was our biggest competition from the late 90s. We was even taking they beat patterns. That's why Cam was on SDE talking about since when did New York start bouncing. That was a shot at Jay-Z actually, but whatever.
Yeah.
Bounce.
It's like it's the crazy, like, the trajectory, like how you said, the sound, and then people got to remember, after that and Dipset and with the Rock breaking up and everything, New York sound was in a stalemate. We started getting records like Mims, This Is Where I'm Hot, and New York artists start trying to get a little bit on that South kind of bandwagon a little bit, where it wasn't even sounding too authentic, and that's where you start to see the loss in identity there. And the South reign took over, and it's just like, I feel like that trajectory going the way it did damage New York hip hop as far as the sound, the appeal, and the camaraderie. I mean, yeah, it's always been competition, but there was a pride in New York amongst people outside of New York, like if how they move and how they represent, to people outside that region. I felt like that's when that fell apart, and it was a little bit of a disarray there. One thing I can give the Ja Rule and Murder Inc. was they were about making hits. It wasn't about the credibility of this, that. It was like Irv was, I'm making hits and we're pumping out hits. And that's what was happening. If you really looked at Ja's albums and we look at 50's albums, I mean, we give you Get Rich or Die Trying. The Massacre was a good album, but like, he declined fast after the G Unit album and all the G Unit solos as far as a solo artist. The music, there's only so many times you could still regurgitate that type of music he was making. He had the ability to make the hits, but one thing I'll shoot him bell on is he gave a lot of his content and ideas or beats and songs to other individuals, to help them. I just imagine what the third or fourth or fifth albums could have been, if certain records didn't go to Game or certain artists on there. He gave his artists a lot, he propped them up a lot, but really, his moment was only so far. And when we look at what was left with after that, it was kind of like, man, we're, what was the next biggest thing that came out of New York from that, after for a little bit, until you get Nicki, of course, but it wasn't much going on there, man.
I look at Nicki in a similar way that I look at 50, except for she doesn't have the mixtapes. I feel like, yeah, Nicki's from Queens or whatever, but when you hear the super bass and stuff, you don't hear that. Like when I hear In the Club, I'm not thinking New York hip hop, right? Free with the super chat says 50's beef didn't do as much damage to New York hip hop as sample clearances and Jay-Z splitting up Rockefeller and signing the South at Def Jam. Jay also had beef with Nas, Dipset, Terror Squad, and 50. When you say signing the South, I guess he's talking about Rick Ross signing to Def Jam and Jeezy signing to Def Jam. Okay, I think those are legitimate things. You're giving the decline of New York hip hop credit mostly to 50.
No, I can't say it's 50. You have to blame a little bit of New York radio. New York radio is one of the biggest things that contribute to a lot of stuff. And then, I don't think it was solely 50 that's like, 50 came here to damage New York radio. I just think that after that rang and after, you get the Dipsets and, and that stuff. It's kind of like the sound is like, where do we go from here? The South is taking over. We're past the gangster music phase again, and it's kind of like the South down there having fun. They down there have crunk. Damn, they done brought the West Coast E40 and Too Short down here, and like everybody's on this wave. And the South was going through so many transitions. They went from crunk to snap to all those other little
Right.
subgenres that came after that, and it was just like, and then trap came about, and that just took over, and it was like the next. Just think about how short of period of those waves that we got with the South. Where was New York as far as that trending? What that new sound is going to be? It was like, damn, it was a big fall off from what we was used to. I mean, Fabulous held it down. That's where Fabulous started to emerge and really do its thing. Nicki came about and everything, but really, like, that New York stuff, it's starting to get dry, man. And I just really think that that beef, I wonder how it would have went if it would have been the other way. I was just thinking about that, and it brought me to this topic that that we brought up for the show. Because I'm like, I wonder what would that happen if that how that would have went in the social media era. How people are so investigative, and these kids and these teens that they're going and they're doing deep dives and researches and pulling paperwork, and they're doing all kind of stuff
Well,
now.
I'll tell you this, and
And
I remember
yeah,
when this happened. Shout out to the legendary Star. Um, Irv Gotti brought the paperwork to Star and Buck Wild's show that 50 Cent had an order of protection against, what I'm saying, Irv Gotti, well, whoever it was, y'all can look it up. But I'll say this, and I agree with you. I think in the social media era, stuff like that would have gotten a lot more legs than it did back then. Because if you didn't hear that episode or see that or was really digging for that, you weren't going to see that on MTV. You weren't going to hear that on other radio stations because everybody was on code and everybody was on script to make sure that this thing went the way that they needed it to go. Now, I will say that about social media. If there are some um, blips in the matrix, if you will, where there's some paperwork that shows up, you got to kind of cover those things. You can't really bury things like you used to. And I think that stuff like that may have went a different way. But what 50 had going for him is the fact that he had the music. He was new for a lot of people. He had a lot of charisma, a lot of personality. He was hilarious. And he had, he just had momentum behind him. He had credible people behind him too, with Dr.
yeah, it was
Dre and
amazing.
Eminem, and he had a classic album behind him as well. I mean, so those are the things that he had going for him. Now back to this whole thing where New York fell off. I will say this about Jay-Z, 50, and a few others at the time. Cam too. Cam's one of them too. Those guys are so versatile that they could actually adapt to so much that was changing in the game. Like, what I'm saying, they could collaborate with some Southern acts effortlessly in ways that, in the 90s, we really didn't get New York artists doing that as much. And I think that the fact that they had that level of versatility, it did put pressure on, other New York acts to kind of assimilate in ways that they may not have wanted to as well. But that sample clearance, that Free spoke about, that's way bigger than people want to acknowledge. And I agree with that. Like, when we talk about 90s hip hop and the stuff that we love the most about 90s and even 80s hip hop, has a lot to do with the samples that we use, sample clearances, the record labels clearing some of these samples. I mean, I was just talking about Tribe's first album. I mean, those albums are totally different if we don't have sample clearances. And a lot of New York's traditional hip hop sound comes from that. And when you have the Southern producers or Southern acts that are coming to the table with tracks that don't need sample clearances, and they're turning this into the label, and the label's able to just make money off of this and make ringtone money off of this. You got a Soldier Boy that comes in, makes a damn beat himself with the crank that or whatever, and it makes all of this money. And then when you're coming to your label talking about, I need all of this stuff cleared with record sales declining, yeah, it's a different battle. And I will say that the labels probably did put a lot more resources into acts that they didn't have to clear any samples for. And what does that do for New York hip hop, it changes it drastically for sure.
Yeah, but it can't be an excuse because just every other region was giving you soul from a sense. Like, all right, I'm gonna say it like this. Like
I agree.
when I say New York lost an identity and it was kind of like, what do we do from here? Let's think about what was happening in New York at that time frame. You know, after the rock breakup, after Junior, after Dipset, we were getting Ron Browse, we was getting Mims, we was getting Mano, we was getting
Yeah.
we're getting those records, that was kind of like Lil Mama, those DJ Webstar records, those type of things. You was getting that at that time outside of, the occasional Jadakiss or the Fab joints and stuff like that. It was kind of like a stale time at that time for New York, as opposed, like I told you, we had the waves of the South, but then the South was giving love to the Midwest. It was giving love to the West Coast. You had the hyphy movement, that start popping in on the West Coast and that Bay Area thing and E40 and Keek the Sneak and all of them was going. And then
Yeah.
you go back to you got to go back to the Midwest and Nelly, reemerged again, but then Chingy had his time, and then even the young and Jaquan, he come down here to the South, signed to Jermaine Dupri. Jaquan even had a run, there was things that was
Houston
coming.
had their run. You know what I'm
Yeah,
saying?
let's
Yeah.
not forget Houston. Yeah, like the
Yeah.
whole, trill, you get Slim Thug, you get Mike Jones, you get Paul Wall, you get Lil Kiki coming into the world and introducing everybody. You get the rerun of UGK and Pimp C being free. And then, like it was just so many things going on, but every single one of those regions gave you soul from where they was from. Like the South was introducing the world what Crunk was from. They was being introduced to what the culture was of that. You go to Houston, they were introducing you to the culture of that when they riding slabs and swingers in the grills. You know what I'm saying? When you go to the West, they was introducing you to hyphy, what was going on up there, and Too Short coming back, and him in the South. Like there was soul from all the regions I was giving that music. Where you guys would like to talk about if it was lyrical miracle or whatever, it doesn't matter. It had soul. New York lost its soul at that time, and I think that's what hurt it all, man. Like the
Chicago was
soul
killing
was,
it too.
it was gone, and then the icing on the cake was when Kanye came through and outsold 50, and then we get that new. We talked about what that wave ushered in, so it was just like the soul was gone, bro. You know what I'm saying? Like it
Now,
was
I
just.
will say that, I'll say this. All of the regions that you mentioned, from my knowledge, their radio, the radio in those cities, in those markets, they supported their own. Like, I can speak from experience here in Atlanta. Like, even though some of those records, even in my time, like, I was really, I'm a hip hop head. It is what it is. I'm an Outkast, Wu-Tang fan. So some of the dumb shit, I don't care if it was local or whatever, I wasn't with, but it made it to the airwaves, right? I feel like New York radio is always, in my mind, going to be the blame because they didn't continue to support New York hip hop, where all these other regions that you're talking about that did emerge, they did go out there and support their local artists. Whether those local artists were incredible or not, they still were going to support their local artists. And I remember going up to New York in the early 2000s and hearing basically nothing but Southern, hip hop on New York airwaves. I mean, it was cool that we were able to, break through and all that stuff. But at the same time, when I'm in New York, I do want to hear, what New York artists got going on. When I'm in the Bay, I want to hear what the Bay artists got going on. When I'm in Houston, same thing or whatever. You want to hear that local. And I think that with New York being such a media capital, they got caught up in the corporate side of hip hop and was just playing whatever was big, right? And they didn't look out for the local New York artists anymore. It was just, you're gonna hear the mainstream of the mainstream. And if we get back to this Ja Rule conversation, I do think that many New Yorkers, and correct me if I'm wrong, Mad Max, probably looked at Ja Rule as a part of that assimilation, right? Like, you're not really repping New York anymore. You're just making, global national hits, which is cool. But what New York radio started to do, that's all you were getting. You weren't getting the lesser famous New York acts anymore.
Yeah, and it's just like,
And I blame New
you
York
know,
radio for that.
but that takes me to my next thing. Like when movement or artist falls off, who do we blame? Do we blame the artist? Do we blame the fans? Or do we blame media? Because I feel like all of those contribute to a fall off of an artist. Media will play a role into how things to the perspective. Let's just think about the East Coast versus West Coast stuff and how the media played a role in igniting that and what turned out to be, and the politics of things. Now you have radio stations that's not going to play certain people because they have
Yeah,
relationships with others. That's kind of like what started happening with New York and Power and Hot 97, and they start banning certain artists from being walking in those buildings. And I remember, I used to listen to New York radio at that time a lot just because there was a lot of drama going on there. I would make it on World
was.
Star Hip Hop. And I remember they'll call an artist that they know is beefing and get another artist on the call. Let's not forget the
They did.
Jadakiss and the Lots, and Diddy, or let's not forget 50 and Cam when they got them on there. They
Yeah.
used to do that type of stuff and it was the ratings, but it was divisive within their own region of what they're doing. So I feel like all of them, to answer my own question, all of them plays a contributing factor to a fall off of an era or a moment or even a artist, because they control the narratives and they control the power of how the music is perceived and dictated.
Yeah. I mean, I remember, even if we're talking about the early 90s, right? You had Stretch and Bobbito, who had college radio out there at Columbia University, in the legendary Stretch and Bobbito show. Wu-Tang, Nas, and shit, even that Big L and Jay-Z freestyle all comes from that show. And this is before hip hop is really mainstream. And I think once Hot 97 and Power 105 kind of became that force, they didn't have that independent radio that was bubbling in the underground in New York anymore to kind of offset how mainstream things had gotten. And yeah, it just became one of those things where it's like, yo, if you mainstream, then you got to sound like this. And there was no New York artist at the time that was willing to break through some of those things. But I mean, you did have Sean Price who was doing it in that way, but they didn't have those outlets. And you had Fab who was putting together the soul tapes and things like that. But yeah, man. I mean, I just wish that some of those efforts would have got a little bit more support. I think the Fab should have got more support from New York radio with the soul tapes. I
Mhm.
think that, what I'm saying, Sean Price should have got more support when he was on his run as well from New York radio. I think the Jadakiss could have gotten a little bit more support too with some of, what I'm saying, the stuff that he was doing underground. But, again, I'm blaming that.
Yeah, but it's like, yeah, that, like I said, the media, radio, the fans, I think all of them play more of a role until artists falling off more so than the artists. Because we've have certain artists that, like, when you go back and you listen to the music, it's not like they really fell off. It's just like when you bring a
Hmm.
culmination of the impact of the fan switching and then the media playing into those narratives, and then now you have the radio stations playing the politics and not playing the music, the perception is that these people fell off. And really, that's not the case, man. The output was still pretty good. It's just that, the politics and the weight of how fans casually switch to the other sides of the winning team. Like I said, it's a culmination of all of it. And like I started thinking about that. Like we can't blame an artist more than we could blame those outside factors, because I think a fall off is when an artist just truly just stop making good music, And
I mean, I don't want to ask for an example of that, but I mean, it's a couple things, right? It's like it's one of those things, man. When you're an artist, and let's just say you're on an incredible run, and we saw this with DMX, we saw this with 52. It's like you consistently do what you do, but if you're a star and you've sold a certain amount of records and you're consistently making street music, or saying that single or whatever, and you got a formula going, after a while people are going to be like, yo, switch up your formula, you're doing the same thing over and over. And then you also have that artist who switches up their formula and they be like, yo, I miss the way you used to make music. So it's like, what is an artist to do? And what really is the secret to longevity in a game like hip hop, where, let's just be honest, it's viewed as a young man's game. And if you continuously grow, with your audience, then you get the fear of certain demos feeling like you just old.
You
Like,
know,
what
I
is who's the example of real longevity in hip hop, and what does that really look like? Thumbs up in the
well
chat.
the the example of real longevity in hip hop is not based on how long an artist had a reign at the top. It's about how consistently they were able to put out quality music. So we give a lot of credit and call people legends just because they stuck around and was like being visible to us for so long. But it's like just because you've been around for this long doesn't really make you a legend. It's really about what did you do in that period of time. Because I feel like we loosely throw the word legend out to people. Just because they're still alive. They didn't happen to get dead, get killed, or in jail, or they didn't really technically fall off. They just stopped doing music. But I'm thinking about real people who really put in the game and had been uh in a career of longevity. Like let's try Snoop. You know what I'm saying? Snoop wasn't just always at the top of it for the majority of his career, but he was always consistent and how long
He
he
was
dropped
always here,
albums.
yeah.
Let's look at E40 and how long E40 been around and how long he's consistently put out stuff. I'm Lil Wayne. I got to give it to him, even as a teen, anyway till now. That reign. There's certain artists that just happen to still actively be consistent and put in work and putting these albums out, and it's like I think it's the most people that we prop up are ones that kind of come and go, and then we don't show enough love to some of these artists that really consistently feeds the base and makes it their effort to still put in quality music. I mean, think about Big Boy and how long Outkast have been broken up and how many albums Big Boy, you know, contributes or puts out, or Killer Mike at
Yeah.
this point, or all these guys are well up in age. I mean, I even have to give love to Nas because Nas even has sparked that creative thing and has consistently been putting out work now and is being consistent. So it's like I feel like we really have to look at the fans a lot more and how they demand so much out of the artists and how they became entitled over the time span because we kind of like age out our own artists. And I think I said that before. Like our expectations and our entitlement as hip hop fans has kind of killed hip hop as well. It's like the constant want for new music. We want explanations for personal choices that artists make in certain things and situations and incidents that happen. You want to control the artist's creative direction. Like when artists want to go left, is like you guys criticize them for that when they want to try something new. But if they stay in the box, you'll say, "Oh, they're making the same stuff that sound
Right.
like the same thing over and over." And then fans now want direct access to the artist. It's like they
Yeah, I mean, yeah, and this is the thing too, man. Not to interrupt you. We're gonna talk about Nas in a second because, yeah, man, I don't think anybody has been as consistent for this long and this great as Nas, and that's why I say he's the greatest. But let's look at, and I always talk about this on this show because I think it's a very interesting topic. Let's look at Missionary. How long have people been asking for a Snoop and Dre album? People of a certain demographic, right? They got that. And people act like they didn't even know it happened. And so, like you said, what does the fans of a certain demo really even look like when it comes to new music being presented to them from their classic artists? Because whether Missionary was good or not, just the fact that we finally got another Snoop Dogg album produced by Dr. Dre, people should, well, the fans from that era who are their fans should have been all on it.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's a lane for it. But like I said, I think how we rate music as fans and how we look at stuff has changed drastically. The expectations that we put on fans and the demand that fans have. Like I said, there's no mystique to artists no more because you have social media and they have that direct access to artists now. So they feel like their old transparency from an artist or you know they're old to be a part of their lives and stuff. So when certain things happen, it's like they're waiting for explanation for artists, or they're putting these expectations on how fast an artist should drop music, or the explanation for personal choices. Like I said, like the fans play a big role in how these artists are kind of dropping music and how they're picking how to go into certain areas and spaces, as far as idea wise and music wise. And we got to start holding the fans accountable about it, man, because like even when we talking about everything is mid to people, and then if everybody likes something and it's like, oh, you guys are glazing, you guys are dick riding, it's kind of like, when do we win? Like, what do and I said this a long time ago, if things are going to be negative, then what is the positive? What do you guys like? And it's just like, as fans, I feel like, it's been some entitlement, man. It's been even how we look at first week sales. You know what I'm saying? Like, I think about the expectations that we placed on the outlook of what first week sells. People be like, oh, he only did 28K or he did 30K, he's washed. And they don't sit with the music. I think the expectations of that has even killed the experience of the music. Like, now, are we basing what the quality of music is based on the streams or sales, or are you really sitting down and enjoying music and being one with it and vibing with it? The experience of it more so than you looking at sales and stuff and be like, oh, it must be
Well,
trash if it didn't put a certain amount of numbers.
you're right. It starts with the fans. Like, even if we're talking about movies, right? Like, I mean, we were going back looking at like all of the films that came out in 1999. It's crazy when you look at all of the films that came out in that calendar year. But you had an audience that was going to the theaters. Not only that, you had an audience that was going to Blockbuster video, that was going to rent or buy this thing when it went to VHS or or DVD early 2000s. We can stretch it to that too. But it's like you actually had an audience for this thing. And so when it came time for directors, film investors, film houses or whatever, to put forth money for these films that they knew that people were going to consume in that way, they were down to do it. Now, fast forward over to music. Yes, artists are going to put together projects based on how the fans are listening to music. And if you have fans who are just skimming through music, looking for one or two songs to put on playlists or whatever, and they're not consuming music in a way where it's like, you're putting in this album or putting on this album to listen to it from front to back, then yes, people aren't going to make full albums anymore. And the mentality of how they're making their music is predicated on the fans. I mean, even when we had Will on here, we were talking about Playboy Carti. His fan base is listening to these songs for more so the live experience. So when Playboy Carti's making his music, he's making this music for the stage, and that's it. You know what I'm saying? And I think that the way that fans consume music has dictated what we're getting in our products and how these albums and songs are coming together. These songs are coming together like TikTok jingles, right? Because that's what the fans are consuming. They're going to listen to about a minute of your song, right? And so these songs are going to be a minute and a half, 2 minutes long. They're not listening to full, 4 verses on a song anymore. When's the last time you heard a rap song that had 4 or 5 verses with somebody, coming in the last verse to clean up? That doesn't happen anymore because the listeners aren't listening for that anymore. And
Yeah,
you're right, the
attention
fans have
span.
to take some responsibility.
Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
because
We
they're not going to
some
make.
people.
Because if people are on here talking about, missionaries mid, that's fine or whatever, and it's not funky enough. Well, they went out there trying to make an album, I guess, that they wanted to make, and it didn't connect. And again, we got to ask ourselves, why didn't it connect? Maybe the music's just bad. I don't think the missionaries' music was just bad. I just think that there's a disconnection for sure. There's a disconnection, and even if we're talking about Dr. Dre and the way that he looks at production, how conducive is the way that Dr. Dre produces and the way he views production? How conducive is that to the way that people listen to music now? And if Missionary gets all L's and all that, in my personal opinion, that's all on Dr. Dre. I think he gets the chief of the blame if people aren't connecting to Missionary, because when I listen to Missionary, it sounds like, from a production standpoint and even Snoop's approach, it sounds like Dr. Dre's brainchild.
Yeah, I mean, I don't blame. I told you, I don't blame Snoop for that album at all. Snoop was in pocket. It just seemed like the the chemistry wasn't there as much as they say as they promoted it to be. It seems like it was a little bit not being more in Snoop's world and more so in the world of just the production being what it is, you know. But
Is Dr.
overall,
Dre's
like
style of production outdated for the current format of how
no,
people consume music?
no, because he did well on the Marsha Ambrosia's album. You know, I
Hip
just
hop
think it
wise,
was.
let's just say let me deduce it to hip hop because people listen to R&B differently than they do hip hop.
Yeah, I mean, great production is great production. I just really think it was just about trying to recapture an interest of a sequel album. That's number one. And then, you know, trying to create some magic when there's no basis of chemistry. You could tell that these guys haven't worked together in X amount of years. That's really what it sounded like.
Yeah,
But I don't think there was an issue to the amount of what Snoop's skill was with rapping. I just think that the beats just sound like too much for the songs, and it was like, are we trying to make good complete songs here, or are we just trying to like, what are we doing? Are we reaching for an award? What we're trying to accomplish here? But the production was just kind of like over. Um, it was just overproduced compared to the lyrics and the rhymes of Snoop. I think Snoop was actually on point lyrically on the album. I don't know. I don't think the album
to me, it
was.
sounds like, not to interrupt you. To me, it sounded like what they were going for, or what Dr. Dre was going for, production wise, were songs that could actually get on television and film and commercials and things
And
like that.
it didn't sound like a true Snoop vibe. Like I didn't when you hear
Yeah,
Snoop on every album, even his No Limit albums, he still had the essence of Snoop there. I don't think Missionary had that feeling of Snoop. Really, it was really him just trying to keep up with these Dre beats. You know that he was overproducing
yeah.
more so than it being essentially a Snoop album. You feel me?
I don't think that Dr. Dre has adjusted to the current times when it comes to production. And that's not a knock on Dre. I don't think that ever happens for producers that produce from a certain era. Like even if we talk about Quincy Jones, I don't think that Quincy Jones in the 2000s was, or even in the 90s to a certain degree, was as hip to how people are listening to albums from end to end like a Babyface was in the 90s. You know what I mean? Like people have their eras where they are tapped in and understand how the listeners are listening to music. And I think that the way that Dr. Dre has been able to make great albums fit for a certain era, and I don't think that this current era or the way that people listen to music streaming wise, I don't think that he has caught up with that. I do think that there was a formula out there for the streaming era when I think Kanye put together those 7-track albums. I think that was a great idea for the way that people listen to music now. Daytona specifically. But even if we look at what West Side Gun does with curating, basically, you know what I'm saying? Like Pray for Paris is brilliant, but I don't think that producers from a certain time period understand that or want to adjust to that. They understand how to make a great album, based on what they know, what I'm saying, and how a great album was made in their era. And I don't listening to Missionary, like I said, I liked it. I'm not in denial, y'all. I'm just being honest. I liked it, but I also acknowledge the fact that a majority of the people didn't like it. And I think that's because the way you made great albums in 1990 don't translate from a production standpoint the same way that they would in 2025. You got so much going against you. You know what I'm saying? Like people aren't going to listen to the whole album. It's different when you bought a CD or bought an album and you put it in. You're going to give it a chance. You're going to give it some burn. You're not going to rush. There was nobody to rush to rush your opinion out there like it is now. Like people don't have the ability to sit with the music anymore, regardless if you want to or not.
But it was just they just overthought it. instead of just really vibing like how they led us to believe.
Yeah.
That's what it really sounded like. At least musically, that's my opinion of how it sounded like. Like they overthought
I
it
want
and
to
led
know
us
what
to believe
Snoop's opinion was on it.
they're probably
I
moving
guess
on, man. These guys been in the game for so long. If it didn't hit, they're just on to the next thing, man. I don't think at they level and then just knowing these guys and how they move out with as artists and as businessmen, I don't really think they're even hung up on it. They're on the next endeavor, on the next thing that they was gonna
for
do.
sure.
I don't
Well,
think they're
I'm saying
sitting with.
that to say because I know when Snoop described how they were working on the album, it was like, what do you say? Basically, I'm the student here, and Dr. Dre, you know what I'm saying? He's taking the reins of things. I'm paraphrasing. Saying all that to say though, I wonder while Snoop was recording this stuff, if he is like, I love this, or it's like, you know what I mean? Like, I wonder. We'll never hear the truth, but I wonder if he was feeling like his vibe wasn't, there either. Because I agree with what you're saying and what the people are saying. It felt a little bit robotic for Snoop. It didn't feel like Snoop was in there just kind of carefree, and he's like one of the most carefree personalities ever in hip hop. And you need Snoop to be Snoop to get a Snoop album.
Yeah, but I'll never discredit Dre beats. I really think Dre could still produce a good hip hop album now, or just produce just any album great now. I just feel like they just missed on that one. But I don't think that Missionary album is a good excuse of what I was saying as far as like how fans have been conditioned to likening an album based on the sales or streams that these streamers or these podcasts and everything talk about. Because I just think about last year alone, even though it started off rocky as far as the output, then you get the Kendrick and Drake stuff. As far as some of those albums that came out, we're looking at them and they're like, oh, they only sold this amount of K streams or this many whatever, and it must be ass. I mean, I look at Corday. Corday's album didn't sell too well, but Corday gave us a good album. Freddie Gibbs gave us a decent, good album. Big X the Plug gave us a decent, good album. You know, all these people produce good music in that latter end part of the year, but it just didn't get the love there because people are looking at what these bloggers, I mean, not bloggers or whatever, these social media. Well, I don't know what you call them. Do we still call them bloggers in the social media era or whatever they are? It's like everybody has these rap pages.
Personality.
Yeah, and then they're always posting the sales, and then you get people like academics that discuss stuff like this, and it starts to become a thing of conditioning with how we measure album and how good the music is based on how much it's talked about to the popular social media era or the sales, when we have to think about there's a world of people that's outside that really just consumes the music for what it is and digest it, and they're not running to the internet to give a think piece or a synopsis of what they believe it to be and ranting and raving. Like, we really need to get back to the experience of music more so than having an analysis right after you hear it or likening it to just the streams. We really need to get back to experiencing it. And it brings me back to your question you asked the last um when you asked me about what's the last physical CD I had. And
Uh-huh.
I mean and I said, I gotta say, Watch the Throne, because I remember the experience of it. I remember me and my dog going to Best Buy and going to get that and going to get some food or whatever. And we sat in that living room and played it on a big stereo in our apartment and just sat there and was quiet and listened to the whole thing from beginning to end.
Yeah.
And it was an
I mean,
experience. Like it was
I
an
agree.
experience.
We got to get the experience back, but we're in a content era. This is content. Like when artists are on their IG pages posting their at Coachella, it's content. You know what I'm saying? And putting out a single is content, content, content. And I think us from a fan perspective have gotten so used to getting so much content from the hip hop world that's not even music, then we expect the music to come at that same fervor. You know what I'm saying? Like, we're expecting basically, people to give us damn near a song a day, a song a month. You know what I mean? And because we're always hearing from our artists, we're always seeing our artists. So we look at the music as that same piece of content. And when people come with a full effort and we've heard it for first couple of days, we move on to it like it's another thing on our timeline or another thing that's on our thread. You know what I mean? And the experience part, I don't want to sit here and blame social media for taking away from the experience, but yeah, it kind of has, because the way that we take in content as a whole, it's here today, gone tomorrow, and it's translated to the music as well. You know what I'm saying? Like if we
Yeah.
hear a story today, that story's gone tomorrow, we're on to the next story. And somehow music has gotten looped in that same, cycle. And there's no way to slow it down. There's no, what I'm saying, there's no barriers to slow it down in the way that television and radio used to slow it down for us, where an album could last for a whole year because you're releasing singles, over periods of time. But I think that we've gotten so used to getting our content on demand and just content daily from, whether it be different pages, whether it be different artists, that the music has just become a part of that cycle. Like we see Lil Boosie all the time, right? You know what I'm saying? And we see who's another big social media personality, or Rick Ross, or 50 Cent. Like we see their content all the time. So the music we expect to come at that level. You know what I mean? And not even say at that level, but when the music does come, we're on to the, okay, well, you got another album? You got another album? It's like, that's stuff that we used to not, view in that way. And I think that our brains have been programmed to just want to consume content, 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 content.
Yeah, and it's just like even when we get and have debates about like hip hop, like the casual hip hop fans that have debates, that's a constant conversation that's brought about is what
Yeah.
music, what artists' music was on the charts, how much they sell. I mean, it was a constant argument for when I hear conversations on or see conversations about Drake. Well, Drake was on the charts for this amount of time, or his albums sold this and views. Like if they make the top 10 of I think I just seen a recent one of like top 10, 20 albums of 2020s are the most selling. And you see like Drake has like 3 albums in it. And people are like, oh, they're the GOAT because this. And then we see it with the Kendrick stuff, like how long his song is trending on the thing, how GNX. I see
Yeah.
a new thing about GNX every day. And like we're older to know better, and we may just listen to the music, don't care about that. But there is a demographic, a younger demographic that cares about that shit. And there's a reason why, these social media hip hop publications, whatever they're considered, puts out these things all the time, and to compare what an artist was and what they sold at this much, and if you sold 28K or blah blah blah, you're not that. And it's just like a programming of thinking that the idea of the success of chart success or streams or amount of time they've been on the charts is like really going along here with the quality of music. Like I said, there was some good projects that came out last year that didn't sell that well, according to what I guess the standard of what a Drake or somebody that's at that peak or whatever would sell. But there were some good projects. Like I said, I will always say, I'll always say, Big X the Plug. I'll always say, Freddie Gibbs last year, Corday. Those were albums. I even like the 2 Chainz and Wayne album. The part 2 of what is it that they what do they call it? Collie Grove. Collie
Mm-hmm.
Grove too. Even that was pretty decent. Like these were projects that were decent, and because of the sales or whatever, and how they're not charting whatever, people didn't talk about them. Like
Well,
they
somebody in
didn't.
the chat says quality music stands the test of time. I feel like in this era, a lot of quality music gets slept on because we move so fast. And when you drop something like Muddy Waters 2 from Redman, it took me a
Yeah,
minute to actually go listen to it because, again, it had a whole lot of tracks on it. So, and that's kind of intimidating, right? In today's time, because you got to stop everything you're doing and you really want to give Redman your full attention. But Muddy Waters 2 was dope. And nobody is talking about it. And Redman has been talking about Muddy Waters 2 for like the past 5 years. You know what I'm saying? And it should be an album that we should still be talking about in April of 2025 because it's that dope. And he obviously spent some time on it, but I think sometimes we move so fast and content moves so fast because we're all about content, 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 that when somebody does drop something like a Muddy Waters 2, it slips through the cracks. And if you don't get on it in the first week, it's just gone. You know what I'm saying? I think that's a good transition onto what Mass Appeal got going on. They're saying 7 albums from 7 classic or legendary artists. This is what people are projecting it to be. I see people are saying Slick Rick, Raekwon, The Emperor's New Clothes. I see Ghostface Supreme Clientele 2. I see a new Mobb Deep album, which Havoc has confirmed is happening. I see a Big L that's saying the Nas and Primo and De La Soul. That is that 8? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 9, 7. So yeah, we got Slick Rick, Raekwon, Ghostface, Mobb Deep, Big L, Nas and Primo, and De La Soul. Now, if all of these people drop these efforts, and I mean, especially with this Nas and Primo thing, I don't want to hear anybody acting like they didn't know that any of these things came out. And again, we're going to listen to them for what they are. I'm sure it's going to be quality. I hope it's going to be quality. But for them to get behind this and roll these things out, and I don't know if these are the official albums, but if this is the official album rollout, a Slick Rick album, a Raekwon album, Ghostface doing Supreme Clientele 2, Mobb Deep doing an album, when we saw Havoc and Nas in the studio, whatever Big L albums dropping, Nas and Primo and De La Soul, like there's got to be some quality there, right? There's got to be some quality there. And shout out to them in the studio and putting together pieces of work. And hopefully the fans, again, will appreciate this.
You know, just think about how many albums we don't go listen to because we're not hearing people talk about them. We just assume that in the trash because nobody's talking about them. Those albums will be that'll happen to.
I see in the chat is Leroy saying that no promo. People can't act like they don't know that it came out if the albums have no promo. What does promo look like for music in 2025? Because I think we said this even with the LL Cool J album, right? LL Cool J was out doing a whole press run and everything. Snoop and Dre did the same thing. But when it comes to some of our legendary artists, when people interview them, are they talking about the new music or are they talking about old shit? And if you're on an interview platform and you got new music out, and let's just say somebody sits down with Raekwon and they don't talk about anything that has anything to do with the new album, they did promo, right? Like, what does promo look like?
It looks like not trying to sell the album, but selling the personality so you could like me to buy the album. So it's like a crash course of visibility and making yourself relevant through just being liked. You know, I think fans now know when you're trying to sell them some shit. So you have to kind of give them a personality of having the fans feel like they know you or at least your story or something so they could find a way to kind of, these are for new fans, not the people that's going to check just off being solid fans. But, you know, it's like those days of how it used to be on 106 and Park when the artists go in there and kind of hype you up for an album, or they'll go on the Breakfast Club and kind of sell you an album, you know, and we don't see him pop out no other time unless it's to sell some shit. I think people are onto that. So now I see that these artists are now kind of trying to sell the personalities or trying to get people get more of a glimpse to them and giving them some transparency and hope that it will translate to people wanting to buy the music. But if the bulk of your interviews is not about the project, like we're talking about a bunch of bullshit, past beefs, just moments, stuff, and then that last 5 or 10 minutes is like, yeah, let's get into the album, and it's like that, and it's kind of like that's what it looks like these days, you know.
That doesn't work though. You know what I'm saying? I feel like if you're going to, let's look at Nas and Premier, right? I think there's a grand opportunity here. And obviously, you know, out of that lineup, this is a very separate situation because other than Supreme Clientele 2, and I can outline that as well. But let's look at the Nas and Primo. If they're doing promo for a new album, there's no reason for them to sit, or any interviewer to sit down and talk with them about anything other than what they are working on musically on this project. You know what I'm saying? And I feel like once hip hop media has moved away from actually making the music or the album the subject and making the artist the subject, then actually pushing this material suffers, especially in the streaming era. Because if Raekwon's doing an interview, I can go listen to Only Built for Cuban Links. If I'm, a newcomer and they're talking about old stuff, what's going to make me tap into the new stuff? You know what I'm saying? Like, you have to be talking about the new material and getting people excited about the new album, or, some song or some collaboration to get people to tap in with the album. Because again, back to the whole missionary conversation, they were doing interviews and I don't think
They're
they were
doing
talking
traditional
enough about the music. Huh?
Yeah. Well, no, I kind of disagree because they did talk a
Okay.
lot. I seen, it was some festival they was doing. They did that, and they even previewed some of the music. Most of the
Mhm.
interviews, it seems like it was literally worded the same. The same thing here that Snoop and Dre saying on one platform, they're going to say they were really selling it in a traditional way, just on newer platforms.
Right.
And I think
And that doesn't
that's the
work.
it gave it the I think that's where the disconnect came for that. But what do you do when you're like them? How do you when you reach a certain
Yeah.
level of success or a certain amount of years in the game? How do you sell an album? Like, how does Raekwon sell an
Yeah.
album to new fans these days? Pretty much all of those artists? How do you sell albums to new fans? Because it's not
I
like
mean,
Nas who have
Common,
fans.
I
I'm
saw
sorry, what was
Common
that?
and Pete go on like the Today Show, Good Morning America. It's like, how do our legendary artists sell new music to, like you said, new fans and shit, even their existing fans? How do you get them excited about a new effort? Now, I think that it's easy. Well, I don't say easy. It's easier for Nas and Premier to get people excited about that effort. You know what I'm saying? That's something that people have been wanting for a long time. But again, there's also a huge margin of error there too, because you cannot live up to people's expectations sometimes when it comes to collaborations like that. But it has to be something about this. Let's just say this is a De La Soul album. There has to be something about this De La Soul album that gets people to want to tap into this album outside of just being a De La Soul fan. Because what our seasoned legendary artists have going against them is their legacy. You know what I'm saying? And for the people who are already their fans, for many of their fans and the people that want to support them, they're still fighting against their legacy to their fans. Because
But
I'm not gonna
that's
lie to
basically
you, if Outkast said they were coming out with a new album, I'd be happy and I'd be looking forward to hearing it. But if I heard it and it wasn't up to the level, and again, I wouldn't even expect it to be up to the level of their classic material. But if it wasn't up to the level, I'm not gonna sit here as a fan and act like you know it is. I mean, I felt the same way about the Tribe album. Like, the last Tribe album was good, but I don't listen to it like I listen to others. So I mean, but again, and that's not a discouraging thing to our older acts, but that's just what they're facing, putting out music. So I applaud any older act that actually takes that jump, because the fans get more and more brutal as time goes on.
and that's why I say there's a role that the fans play as well as media and everything, but there's also a level that has now I'm flipping the conversation to being devil's advocate on the artist part. I feel like now
Uh-huh.
as an artist, if you are trying to capture a newer demographic or new fans, I don't think that I don't think that there's a formula of how to do it these days, and I don't think they really care as the effort wise because some of these artists lean just on their fans that's been with them all these years, and that's who they cater to and sell to. Some of them don't
Yep.
want to go and do that, and some of them just don't know how. There's no formula for it. So, like, say a Nas, right? Nas is not trying to sell music to a new fan base. Nas has such a cemented core fan base. It's kind of like I don't want to say a cult following because when people hear the word cult following, they're gonna think about me minimizing the fan base. When I say cult following, I'm talking about loyal and they move as a pack. And it's just like there are certain people that have fan bases that's never gonna leave them. Nas have one of those. So when he drop an album, he's gonna get that love as opposed to there's people that love Wu and stuff like that, but when Raekwon and Ghost drop, do they have that same level of fan base that's going to support it in that? And will it help someone like them to go grab a newer demographic or newer fans for their stuff? It's kind of like it's a question. Is like how do you lose and how do you win really? And it's really hard, you know.
I mean,
It's
you just
really
have
hard.
to stay. And I don't want to say it like it's minimizing anything. Like, oh, you just have to stay consistent. Now, what Nas has done in his career is damn near impossible because I can't think of anybody who's done it this long and this consistent and having these different runs. But what was pretty dope about what he did with this, most recent run with Hit Boy was the fact that I've heard younger fans say that, yo, they're a fan of that Nas. Like, they don't really have any memories of the Nas I grew up on, but his material with the King's Disease series and the Magic series was so good that he was able to actually get some younger fans who were just checking for music. You know what I'm saying? And
That ain't
I think that's the way to do it is to stay consistent. I think the days of our legends stepping in and everybody rolling out the red carpet for one project is kind of over. You kind of got to go on
yeah.
a run,
Nas,
you
and
know?
that was the cool thing with Nas. Like even Nas had he without trying to sell it and oversell and try to capture a new thing, he just went in there and they made music and it did capture new fans who went back and then go listen to his old projects and they support him. I think another person who's really good at doing this is Jim Jones. Jim Jones captures a lot of new fans,
Yeah.
a lot of new younger fans. And the only difference between him and Nas though is Jim actually moved with the youth a little bit. Like he's
Yeah, he
out there a
collabs with the youth heavy.
bit more, but Nas is like he keeps it hip hop and he keeps it like that. He still captures new fans. It's kind of like it's really dope how these artists are able to do it. But I don't think a lot of older artists have the luxury of that of a Nas or even a Jim Jones of being able to capture it in that same essence. And that's why I say we've been conditioned to think that if an album's not being talked about or overhyped of the anticipation, or if the last album sells when it's doing something, we just write them off as the shit is bad. And it kind of sucks because, like I said, music should be an experience, man. It's either it's good or it's bad. I always said that. And people, it's different when people are not even giving it a chance because, oh man, nobody talking about that. It must be mid. Or man, the last one only did 20K or 15K. I ain't listening to that. It must be trash. Like, we really have to start
Well,
looking at it. How do you
I think
sell
one of the
to?
biggest things and one of the biggest challenges is for fans and artists to be inspired, and I do think that, and even if we were talking about the New York hip hop conversation, I think when sounds change, which they inevitably do in hip hop, certain people who were really good at a certain era of hip hop, they don't want to make that adjustment. You know what I'm saying? And they're uninspired to do so. And I think the greats just continue to be inspired. And I think a lot of the fans, when you talk about inspiration, they're hearing a lot of uninspired acts. They're hearing, sounds and styles and things like that change, and they're not inspired to continue to be hip hop listeners. So they'll just dig into the hip hop that they liked, previously and just listen to that. And it's tough for everybody in the process to grow. But yeah, I think that you got to start with being inspired. And I think that somebody like Nas, his longevity is based on him being inspired. And I do think that Hit Boy had a lot to do with, you know, inspiring him even more after they worked on that first King's Disease, because they made 5 more albums right after that. And hopefully everyone on this list or who is potentially coming out with these mass appeal records are inspired when they're making them. And but again, us as a fan base, we gotta rally around that. And I do think even here, man, like on this show and on this channel, when we were actually speaking about the run that Nas and Hit Boy were having, same thing with Griselda. while it was
Mm.
happening. I think that when artists see that, it's more momentum for them to keep going. I don't
Yeah.
think that if you guys weren't rallying behind the whole King's Disease series like you were, and these conversations were being had, I don't think they would have made 6 albums. I don't. But again, if we can rally around artists that are doing good work. I mean, we're not gonna gas up something that's trash, but if we can actually give, credit where credit's due, and people are putting together great stuff, like I feel like Muddy Waters 2, that was a huge opportunity to speak on something that I thought was dope, and maybe I need to still do a breakdown of it. But we got to give credit where credit's due, because that keeps the momentum going and that keeps the artists going. And I think when artists see that people aren't engaging, then they're like, well, fuck it. I ain't gonna make nothing else. I ain't got to make nothing else. I'll go do a show.
And one of the cool things I will give the youngins like credit for is their power to reignite it to reignite an artist is very big. Like I'm seeing that going on with young Lay or young LA from from out of Atlanta. The Ain't I track is bumping again like I'm back in high school. I mean, no, that was college for me. Like it's bumping like I'm in college again. I was like, hold up, ain't I? People are bumping in their cars like when I'm riding around, people are bumping Ain't I like it's a new record. And a lot of
Yeah.
artists may catch that sometime that these youngins are going back and catching a record that may sound like it could exist in today and blowing it up, and people are going back and going to listen to that artist catalog, and that artist is popping again. I kind of see that with Ja Rule was talking about that on the Breakfast Club, and how his music aged and how the younger generation are responding to his stuff at shows and whatnot. And I've seen that with my own eyes because I've been at a show where Ja Rule was on it actually. Ja Rule was an opener on the Erykah Badu show I went to, and I seen the response was like, he's popping right now. Like, and this is not me capping or nothing. Like, people were responding to Ja like he was a new artist. Like, it's kind of
Mm.
crazy, and I have to kind of give the younger generation a little bit of bell because what they discovered that they never knew about, like, is new, and then it reignites again. Like the power in what they have for certain things going viral, being relevant again, that contributes to those streams is kind of crazy. You know what I'm saying?
Well, if it
Like,
sounds good, it sounds good, and
yeah,
and I think that we do have the power today to have access. Like there are downfalls to having too much access. I don't feel like music is an exclusive experience anymore. But the positive of having so much access is, yeah, you can look at a Ja Rule Breakfast Club interview and then go to one of your streaming platforms and just start playing his music and form your own opinion about it. You know what I mean? And Ja Rule made some really dope music in his time. I'm not gonna sit here and act like I was the biggest Ja Rule fan per se, but I respected his
but
music
I fuck
and
with
I'm saying his art and his lane, and the fact that, like I said, he carved out his own lane when he was standing next to two giants in Jay-Z and DMX, and he found a way where he wouldn't be overshadowed, and he made his own way. And I totally respect how Ja Rule was able to make that happen. I came across something though, and this is kind of on par with what we're talking about. So
okay.
it's a source article, or not really an article. It's like a source post, if you will, from back in the day. This is from 1996, January 96. So this is 29 years ago. And they asked some of the, big time players in the game, what would you like to change about hip hop? And these are things that people said 29 years ago. Jizza said, there's too much. I want to change. I want to change to say, but definitely tired of whack lyrics. This is 1996. Master A
96.
says the division between East and West Coast, particularly along musical lines, hip hop now is way too regional, where songs can work only in certain regions. We don't have regions anymore, so that changed.
Yeah.
Russell Simmons says, I like for people to have more than one emotion. There needs to be more diversity and more balance in what's going through rappers' heads. We need more creativity and subject matter. Since 1996 now. Bushwick Bill said, the mainstream appeal. The fact that music has to have pop life to get airplay. I wish that we could go back to our roots and just express ourselves. It seems like the same complaints. Grand Pooba says some stability, health insurance, dental benefits, tangible stuff. Shout out to Grand Pooba for that. Kid Capri said violence and disrespect. I want to see it go back to the beginning where it was about rhyming and fun. This is 1996 now. Funkmaster Flex said the East Coast, West Coast nonsense. Sadat X says rappers who are good should be monetarily compensated. That's so vague. Like, that's so subjective. What makes a rapper good? How could you pay a rapper based on their skill set per se?
Yeah, that was like the worst one out of all of them, but the other ones was
Sean
the same.
Puffy Combs.
This is
Sean
wild.
Puffy Combs says the egos.
That's funny
Diddy
as hell here.
Diddy 29 years ago said the egos are the problem in hip hop. Eric Sermon says my record sales. He wants those to change.
Oh man.
Crazy Leg says people running around and portraying gangsterism as an element of hip hop. Pete Rock says I would move hip hop away from the influence of drugs and guns that has become so important in today's music. We created this music, so we define its direction. Dougie Fresh says the credibility given to rap songs about gangster stories and war stories, and no love given to the other dimensions of hip hop. Gangster rap is only one real aspect of life. Everybody concentrating on one aspect of hip hop is eventually gonna hurt it. Interesting. All right, E40 says we need to stop knocking each other. Everybody, East Coast and West Coast, needs to just salute and kick. Salute and kick back and get that allowance. Run from Run DMC says to change the negative response the media is giving to hip hop now. Run DMC always made positive records and always got respect. And Coolio says it should be mandatory that artists get at least $1 on every record sold, free and clear, non-recoupable. Interesting perspective. 29 years ago. This is 1996. So yeah, every generation has problems. And I think that in 1996, it looks like overwhelmingly the biggest beef was whack lyrics and East Coast, West Coast stuff. And gangster rap basically taking being the face of what mainstream media saw as hip hop. So yeah, that was an article from the Source magazine back in 1996. I would love for them to be able. Well, some of those individuals have passed on, and Russell's in Bali, and Diddy is currently incarcerated. But I wish they could ask some of these people the same question in 2025 and see how some of these answers have changed.
Yeah,
what would you like hip hop?
It's funny, man, because it's like you could fit those same things being said, minus a little bit of that East Coast, West Coast stuff, and you couldn't apply it to the same things that people are saying today. Like the complaint still kind of really hasn't changed. That's what I'm saying.
Joseph was saying the lyrics are whack in 1996.
Yeah.
Rappers were too gangster. I got that sentiment. I mean, thing is, man, like when we talk about, and we just spoke about this before when we talk about Ja Rule and the 50 thing. If hip hop is going to cross over, and we talked about this last week with the Will Smith thing, if hip hop's going to cross over, yes, it's going to be pop type style records that actually cross it over. I'm trying to think of like the most successful gangster rap, or I don't want to say gangster rap album, but the most successful rap album that didn't have a pop crossover hit on it. Does that even exist?
A successful that didn't have a pop
Like if you're talking
hit.
about, yeah, there was a hit album that didn't have like a hit record on it. I don't know what that looks like.
Oh no, there's something that exists. It's just trying to think of it off the top right now.
Can't think of it. I mean, because that's what makes Illmatic and Ready to Die different. Ready to Die has those hit records on it. I mean, I'm not trying to minimize that because I do think that as a complete album, Illmatic's a better album. But if you want to talk about from a sales standpoint, Ready to Die sold the albums because it had those hit singles and songs on it. That Illmatic didn't have a Juicy, a One More Chance remix, a Big Papa. It didn't have those records on it. And so I would like to know specifically, and nobody ever says any of this stuff, but I would like to know back in 96 what they considered a pop rap record.
Yeah, cause I'm thinking in my head what came out at that year and what
Are
would
we
be.
talking about California Love or something? I don't know. Like, what's a
Yeah,
pop rap record for 1996?
yeah, the mainstream then is kind of different from the mainstream now. Like,
Yeah, because the
yeah,
hit songs in '96 is like Elevators from Outkast. If I Ruled the World from Nas. You had California Love, of course. Shit. What else was '96? Y'all help me, like as far as radio goes. Five on it from the Loonies. That's '95, but and maybe like Bone Crossroads. Like these are dope songs. Like,
you know, even when they say stuff like the comment you said there was a comment about somebody talking about like whack raps or something like that. Like who was whack then? Like what was the idea of who was whack in '96? Who were people saying was whack back then? I was a kid.
yeah,
What were people
who was
saying what was whack
successful
in '96?
and was a whack rapper in '96? Like who was a successful whack rapper in '96? Trying to think. I mean, y'all help me out in the chat. I mean, it's interesting though, but those it's very subjective, right? When it comes to what people consider whack, and I wanted to read that because like you said, a lot of the complaints could be applied to today. Now, granted, I do think music is at a much different place today than it was 29 years ago, but at the
Mhm.
same time, it's like, what are the solutions? And are we giving enough attention to the people who are doing the dope shit? Because that's my thing. I think that's where the solutions need to be, need to be applied. Are we giving the credence to the people that are actually doing the dope shit?
No, and like I said, that's always going to be a question I'm asking currently here. Is like the negativity is always louder than the praise, unless it's certain type artists. You know what I'm saying? There's certain artists
So you
that
said Coolio? Coolio was whack in '96? Okay. But see, Coolio even had Gangsta's Paradise and Too Hot, and
people
those
like
were,
Coolio.
man.
Yeah, people like Coolio.
I just came across this MC from the Bronx, man. Keys MC. He dropped this project. I'm gonna do an editorial and I'm gonna write out about it. It's called Bronx Mentality Volume One, and he's just spit. You know what I'm saying? And the beats, rhymes, and everything in there. So yeah, check that out on your streaming platforms. Bronx Mentality Volume One. Keys MC. He's Keez MC. But yeah, I mean, there's a lot of great music out there, man. Shout out to Super. Like I said, you and Super had a conversation where, I was talking about artists that need more light. And there's dope music out there. We just got to give it to the right attention. They said Jermaine Dupri was whack in '96.
Nah,
I mean, look, for the people y'all naming, they said Diddy. But see, in '96, Diddy didn't even have an album. I don't even think Can't Nobody Hold Me Down was out yet.
yeah, that's what I'm saying. I don't know who was considered whack at that time. Like who was who's the poster child for whack in '96? I don't know. I can't. That was a
I
kid.
agree with you. I mean, I was there. I was a kid too. I'm trying to remember because I had like this little. Back then, I used to tape, what I'm saying, shit off the radio, and so I had like a cassette tape where what I'm saying, something I like come on the radio, I record it, and I remember everything that came out during that time period. Mac 10, Faux Life was out around that time. It didn't feel like anybody was whack though. I mean, there were some people who weren't as lyrical as others. Now, I guess, Jizza might have a different perspective on what a whack MC is, but overall, man, like everybody was giving their efforts. Lord with the super chat says Puffy was sampling pop records. Okay, let's explore that. What pop records are we talking about that Puffy was sampling? Now, I do remember the conversation about the fact that, oh, Silk the Shocker. I see you guys. That
Silk the Shocker was the
96.
man back then.
Yes, yeah. Silk the Shocker wasn't until like a 98 thing, honestly. It wasn't 96. But as far as like the sampling thing with Puffy and Bad Boy, I do remember talks about the fact that they had samples that weren't creative, right? So back in the day, people who were sampling, they were chopping things up, and they got a lot of, it was, the mission was to find something obscure or something that you didn't think was going to work and flip it or whatever. And what Puffy would do was take things that already have worked and things that were on the surface and just turn them into a hip hop record. And I think a lot of people felt like that was cheating. Like it's cheating to go out there and just take "I'm Coming Out" from Diana Ross and make a rap record out of it. Or, I mean, Juicy Fruit hadn't worked before. I mean, what pop records are y'all talking about that Puffy took? Are we talking
Somebody
about?
said Silk wasn't the man ever. Was he crazy? Silk did numbers too. I hate that Silk.
You know what?
But
This is what
Silk
I'll say
did
about
numbers.
Silk, man. I respected the fact that Silk went out there and created his own style. I do think his style is very E40 influenced because Master P and and them, they were in the Bay. You know what I'm saying? That's when No Limit started. So I do think that Silk is very E40 influenced, but Silk could have rapped any kind of way that he wanted to, and he chose to go with a whole different style. And I give him credit for that. Now, do I think that Silk was one of the dopest? Nah, I mean, it wasn't one of my favorite No Limit artists, but I will give points for originality. You remember Roscoe P. Cold Chain?
Yeah.
He was dope to me. He had a different approach, man. Like,
the clips,
a lot of people don't like Capadonna. Capadonna's dope to me. It's different. Like, I respect people who come with a different style, and I will give Silk the Shocker that. I will give Silk that. But yeah, 96, man, I can't really think of. I can think of somebody. This could be directed at people like Skilo. But that's one person. Like, I remember I wish I was a little bit taller. I wish I was a baller. I wish I had a girl who looked good, I would call her. Wish I had a rabbit in a hat with a bat and a 6'4" Impala. And I could see that maybe, but that's a one-off, one-hit wonder type situation. And we've had Skilos and young MCs throughout time. I don't care what anybody says. To me, no, I mean, there's no disrespect. Young MC was always whack to me. I'm sorry. I mean, just keep it real.
Yeah, those are different artists, though. Those are different type of artists, though.
See, somebody said CeeLo was dope. Okay, there we go.
And we have to put it like this because I see Silk getting some hate in the thing, but if anybody has an idea of that, the mass, that No Limit thing was something that I really grew up on, and we did an episode about that, about Cash Money and No Limit. If anybody want to crash course on what that was like, and they don't think Silk did numbers, he definitely did. If people want to go visit that, want to go revisit that was a great episode.
And it's funny, man, because even back then, people would talk about Silk not being, the dopest in No Limit because, everybody had their favorite No Limit artist. But like you said, people still bought the album. And
That's
Master P and the whole No Limit camp, they did a great job of selling the whole camp to us, and we went and bought. Well, not me, I wasn't a huge fan, but everybody around me was. They went and bought every No Limit album that was coming out because they understood that everybody was going to be on these albums. So even if you bought a Silk album, it wasn't like you were going to get an album where it's just Silk rapping for 20 songs. You getting the whole No Limit camp.
yeah.
Listening back to the No Limit stuff, I got to be honest, man. I think C Murder might have been the best rapper on No Limit. I'm not counting Mystical. But when I listen to C Murder actually sounded like he was the most seasoned one there.
See, I grew up as a kid listening to that, and my opinions really hasn't changed back then. I really thought that I really like C Murder. I thought Mac was dope too.
Mac was dope.
Um,
Mac
I
is
thought
dope,
Mac.
yeah.
Mystical was doing his thing then, but it's like I said, we look at stuff with today's eyes, but dog, P was hard back then, dog.
He was
I'm
fine.
just gonna be honest. P was hard back then. You know what I'm saying?
I
Like,
think what killed P was the fact that he started trying to keep up with the time. Once again, like I said earlier in the show, when times change, his adjustment wasn't the best with it. I think Cash Money coming in the way that they did really threw P off of his square. And he lost Beats by the Pound at the same time. I don't know what happened with Mystical and how Jive just took him back, but I guess that was gonna happen regardless. It felt like No Limit helped Snoop and Mystical sustain or get to another level at that time, and then the big labels just took them back. Lloyd with the super chat says, hip hop heads thought that Silk the Shocker was whack. Yeah. Well, I mean, hip hop heads thought that damn near everybody from the South was whack. I remember Project Pat getting 2.5 mics in the Source. I think the only rappers from the South at that time that really got credit for being an MC was like Outkast, Goody Mob, Scarface. And whenever, Luda came, I don't even think Mystical got that kind of credit. Mystical, again, he has a lot of trouble in his personal life, but as an artist, I always thought Mystical and Juvenile were some of the most original rappers I've ever heard. Like their approach to things. I mean, you could be Lyrical Miracle or whatever, but when I hear Mystical and Juvenile, I'm like, how did they come up with this? Like, how did Juvenile come up with High to even think to make that song, to execute on it the way he did? Same thing with Mystical when he made Shake It Fast. It's like nobody else could have made that. Nobody.
over a Neptune's
Lord
beat, man.
Chat says it was the rap versus hip hop argument in '96. I hate that argument. What were you gonna say?
I said, and it was over Neptune's beat. He did it twice over Neptune's, man. Like, and that goes back to it. I sent it was a video in our chat earlier. It was like Pharrell working with Justin Timberlake on a record. And I was just like, yo, this is an example of how it is for a producer and an artist relationship in the studio should be. You know what I'm saying? Like crafting a record for real. And that's when you get I said, I've never seen a product come out when you have that type of collaboration, it'd be poor or it'd be bad, because those vibes always create good music.
That's one of the songs that I would love to have been inside of the session for to see how they came up with Shake You Fast in the way that they did. Because this dude comes in the song like, I came in with the mic in my hand. Oh no, he didn't say that. But you know what he said. Don't make me put my foot in your ass, be cool. It's like, how do you even think about starting the verse like that? Like, you know what I mean? Like, man, right here, want to get under that dress right there. What did he say? It's the second verse. But yeah, it's like, dude, he's just saying stuff that it's like how are you coming up with this, man? Like the approach to it, and it was a hit, and it was very like he has a one of one style. I think Mystical, Oh Dirty, of course, Juvenile. I can even put Wayne in there to a certain degree. Like they have such original styles, and I give New Orleans that, man. Like between Mystical, Juvenile, Wayne, and even BG, like they got some really original individuals down there.
Yeah, man.
Yeah,
Yeah, just to further the conversation, the impact of those artists, it's kind of funny to look back on now. And when I look at Mystical and when I look at artists like that was coming in with something different, like Mystical, can you tell that he was from the South with listening to those records?
no, I mean, I knew, you know what I'm saying, because I've been listening to Mystical since Here I Go and all of that stuff. But yeah, I mean, there's no region on that.
It was just so
It's really
different and
not.
so fresh that you couldn't even pinpoint the reason for it. It's like some people are just new and bring something different. It's just dope, and that's what it was, because they went out and got Mystical. Mystical didn't seek them; they seek Mystical. So that showed you how dope he was back then. I remember I had this and one video game. It was probably like the only and one video game they probably came with. I don't know if they came with early, but I remember they had Make You
I don't remember that.
yeah, they had Make You Say on it. It was an and one video game, man, on one of the
Uh,
old stations, and Make You Say was like on the soundtrack. And I remembered that, you know. So, being different, it helps. It helps
yeah.
in that
What
case.
he was like, you think I'm tripping, bitch? I ain't tripping. I'm
Improvement.
buying if you got nice curves for your iceberg. I'm like, yo, what is that? Hope this indecent proposal make you do something with me. Like,
Oh
man,
man.
like, yeah, again, it's just different ways of stylistically approaching, music, and I think we need more of that. I saw somebody say Blueface is whack. Um,
No, I don't like Blueface. I kind of.
Again, man, I don't love Blueface as a personality, but again, when I hear him approaching music in a different way, I'm like, I feel that it's different. You know
I
what I'm
like it's
saying?
different
Like,
because even like people say like E40's whack, but I actually like how E40 come on those tracks. I really don't like how like
yeah,
Blueface rap on those records. I'm not even gonna lie.
because the truth is, man, like E40, Silk the Shocker, and yeah, I'm sure Blueface too. They could approach rap from a, what I'm saying, regular, I'm spitting this bar, hit this bar, whatever. But to actually think about your style on the next level and say, nah, I'm gonna rap like this. I'm sure that wasn't the first style that Silk ran with. You know what I mean? Like, I gotta give him points for
That's what I'm saying.
creativity.
It's dope because like Silk, when you hear him talk, you sound like he from NO, but like his music, like the way he's rapping, I couldn't pinpoint him to the South, because he had such a different approach to how he crafted those records. I wouldn't thought of him as a Southern artist. Of course, when you hear the beats, you can say that, but just a
I
style of
think he has
rap.
the worst ad lib ever, though. Yes. He has the worst ad lib ever. Like,
What?
yeah, it's bad. I don't like Jadakiss' ad lib though. I don't like the Jadakiss laugh. I never did.
That can't be reduplicated though. Nobody could do that like
Nah,
Jadakiss.
nah. I don't think Jada needs that, man. Like Jada to me is like Jada. If you want to talk about just beats and rhyme, well, not beats and rhymes, it's just talk about a rapper who is going to hit you with line after the line and what I'm saying, a consistent style. I don't think it gets any better than Jadakiss. What Jadakiss does that's incredible to me is the fact that he still sounds as great as he did 30 years ago, but he'll come with the same flow and the same approach to any beat, and it all fits. He could
I mean,
rap like that on a Lil Jon beat, and it works. And it's like that's real special because you always hear, especially New York MCs, like if they got to adjust to something down south, they kind of adjust their, their flow. And he never had to do that,
yeah, I'm
and he
telling you,
still
man,
crazy.
Jadakiss doesn't have a bad verse. It was funny. I was DJing a set on TikTok Live earlier, and I was playing the remix of Gucci Man Wasted that got Lil Wayne and Jadakiss on it, and it's just like, yeah, dog, Jadakiss doesn't have a bad verse. Like, I need somebody to tell me a bad Jada verse because Kiss does not have a bad 16, bro. Like, he doesn't. If you could find a bad 16, tell me. I haven't heard a bad 16 from Jada ever. Ever.
Jada's one of those guys, man. When we talk about rating all time MCs, it really makes it difficult when you start talking about people like him. You know what I mean? Like, I don't really know where to put Jada because I know that bar for bar, he could stand up with anybody. You know what I'm saying? Like, and he's proven to do that. He's one of the few people who's rhymed with Biggie on a high level, rhymed with DMX on a high level, rhymed with Jay on a high level, rhymed with Nas on a high level, and it's like the only thing that he's missing is, you know, that quote unquote classic album that people talk about, but he's been a part of so many classics. And again, we saw even in the verses, and I ain't even just talking about the Dipset verses, even when he had his verses against Fabulous, he
Yeah.
has a very sneaky
What about that?
catalog. Yeah. He's the only one that did the verses twice, essentially.
Yeah, yeah. Nobody
You
really
know what
talk
I'm
about
saying?
with Fab. That's when niggas got drunk. I remember that one. That was kind of funny. That was
Yeah.
before like the production of verses was really up there. That's when they was like, I think they was in the same room for that one though. But I remember that.
Yeah,
I
I
think
think the verses was a lot better then too. You know what I'm saying? It was a lot more organic. Lord with the super chat says Pharrell had Mystical do that song. Mystical did not want to do that song. Pharrell's a
it worked
genius.
for him. I bet he glad he did it because he ran it back and did Danger, and
Yeah,
that was
yeah,
it too. You know, so it
yeah,
worked.
yeah.
Yeah,
But yeah,
what's it?
man. But yeah, that Jadakiss, man. I don't know, man. He's one of those guys where it's like, yeah, I don't think he's top 5, but there could be an argument for
Make a
Jadakiss to
strong
be,
case.
yeah. And
Make a
I
strong.
think Jada's one of those legends right now that he could drop his best album ever right now. I think he has the ability to do that.
Never had a
I
bad
would
verse.
love to see Jadakiss and Alchemist make a project together. I know we throw Alchemist on everybody, but I would like to hear Jadakiss and Alchemist because I know how consistent Jadakiss is.
Never had a bad verse. Let's get into
Never
Coachella, Mike.
had a bad verse. Do you
No, he
guys
doesn't.
know of a weak Jadakiss verse? I can't think of it.
There's not a bad verse.
Did you like his verse on the Usher song?
Which joint? Which Usher joint?
Um, the one with the shit live streaming messing me up. Um, I hear it in my head right now. It's on Confessions. Um, ah, it has the. I'm about to look it up real quick. I hear the song in my head. I even know what the sample is. Confessions
I think I know
throwback.
what you're talking about, but I don't know if that was
Yeah,
on
throwback.
Confessions.
Mm-hmm.
Okay,
Yep, yep. The Just
man,
Blaze track.
he don't.
I think that
Jadakiss
the
don't
verse was
sweat.
cool. I think they could have put anybody else on there, but I don't know, man. I mean, when you get on an album like Confessions, I mean, it is what it is.
That was a placement. That was a placement one. I don't know how they made that connection, but that was definitely one of those intentional targeted placements. I think, but yeah, man.
Amir Thoughts with the super chat says, "What do y'all think of Jada and a Conductor album? Even better,
Not mad at
yeah.
that
Give me a Jada and
one. Not mad
Conductor
at that
album.
one.
I would
Yeah,
love to hear that.
yeah.
I think
Jadakiss.
that would be
Yeah,
necessary.
he doesn't have a bad album, man. I'm telling you. I mean, not a bad album, but he doesn't have a bad verse, man. There's not a bad 16 from Jadakiss, man.
Well, why do you
Oh,
think that Jada doesn't have the
just
you
the
know the
mainstream appeal, man. The promotion, the mainstream appeal of that stuff. You know, that
you
was
know
lost after Bad Boy. That's all. The most appeal that we got to see out of Jada was like the when he had Y and he had the record with Mariah Carey or whatever. That's the most visibility that we really got of him in the mainstream. You know,
I will say this.
oh, that in.
I know y'all probably gonna kill me for this, but I think Jadakiss could have had a classic album with Bad Boy. I think so. I think Puffy could have made Jada a classic album.
I think that album that had Y on it and everything, and the record
Kiss of Death. Kiss of
with
Death
Nate
is
Dogg,
dope.
whatever. You can listen to that album from beginning to end. That was a good album.
Yeah, I mean, Kiss of Death and Kiss the Game Goodbye are actually good albums. I think though, when it comes to Jadakiss and the type of skill set that he has and the person that we know him to be, we were expecting a Dark and Hell is Hot. We were expecting, you know, a Reasonable Doubt, an Illmatic, um, a Ready to Die. I don't know if you're gonna get that from Jada, but I think we could have at least gotten a Harlem World.
Yeah, I don't know. I feel like he
Oh,
did. I feel like the album that had Y, it gave you a good it gave you a good versatile album because you know you have the mainstream, you have the joint with Mariah, you have Y, you have the joint with Nate Dogg, and then you have the By Your Side record, and you know you got the street stuff in there like that. You can really
By
listen
Your
to that
Side is
from beginning to end.
fire.
That's what I'm saying. Like I have to
By Your Side is
when I
fire.
get the DJ bag and they keep me on the live on TikTok, I'm about to start doing some reminders to people, man, because like that album was really a fire album, man. I'm just gonna have to start putting together some sets and reminding some people,
Well,
man,
you can
because
appreciate this transition.
yeah,
By Your Side is the same sample that Kanye used for the game with Wouldn't Get Far.
yeah.
Um, Kanye and the game have fallen out, seems like. And the
I
game
expected
crashed.
that.
You expected that to happen?
Yeah,
Again, man, we were sitting here
I,
talking about the documentary 3. I didn't expect Kanye to produce the whole documentary 3, but you never know, right? But I hate that this went sideways. While you're giving your point on it, I'm gonna pull up the actual tweet from the game. But you said you predicted this to happen. What were you gonna
yeah,
say?
just not this soon. You know,
Yeah,
because I just think about Game's personality, and I just see Kanye. He's fell out with everybody that's been on the side. I think the only person that's really sticking to the side still is Consequence. They be on and off, but like he just, you know, he dissed Ty Dolla Sign and you know all them. I felt like the only person left was Game, and knowing how Game's personality and how that was, I knew that when I seen um when Game took pictures and he was around certain people, I was like, oh, it's only a matter of time.
yeah. Well, this is
Yeah.
what the game posted. He says, "Nigga, you asked me did I know top 5? I said yeah. You said he was threatening you, and I asked if you wanted me to reach out to him. You again said yeah. So I hit top 5. I told him to let it go. Out of respect for me, he agreed. I text you to tell you it was done, and you changed your number, nigga." And he also said, "I'll be back in LA in a week." Oh, he was talking about the Maybach. Sorry. He said, "F you and those Maybachs, little nigga. I'll be back in LA in a week. Come get them yourself. I ain't never asked your weird A for nothing. And when you gave me the cars, I said you ain't have to, and I was good, but you insisted. When you hit me with the you ain't never got to worry about nothing ever in life, I owe you for being the only solid N word out of everybody. Got my number, but won't call like a man and address the situation you asked me to fix." Called him the P word. Then he said, "Nobody on earth is weirder than these industry niggas." I will say this, man. That's not a good. It's not a good look. I mean, it's a lot of non-good looks for Ye right now, but the few people that were actually, riding with him are not.
Yeah, well, you know, here's the thing. The only thing that I feel that sucks from this is it messes with the release of documentary 3 or whatever's coming of that. And I was really looking forward to what he was gonna do with that album. But
Me too.
on the flip, I kind of expected something like this to happen. And again, I'll stand by this. I didn't think it was gonna happen so soon, but I figured that this was gonna happen. You know, Game has their relationship is a little bit more interesting than what people actually speak about. Like because like he fucked with Game. I mean, Kanye has always fucked with Game, produced from him or whatever, and then Game. I remember a few years back he made a record that leaked, and when he was talking about smashing like Kim Kardashian and stuff like that, and I thought that was weird. Then they cool again. I mean, they're cool because it never seemed like they fell out or whatever, but they cool. And then it's like he gets on the Drink Champs podcast and say how Ye did more from him than what Dre did from his whole career, and then he's been loyal from him since then. But it's like then Game, he just has different ways of how that relationship is with Kanye. It always like in the latter part of it started looking like an opportunist thing of it, and I would hate to place that on him, but it never seemed like it was genuine because how could you make a record about smashing this man's ex-wife and then you do that type of stuff and then now you cool, now you say these things is happening, now he's working on a new album. It never seemed like it was really genuine to me, but being at where Kanye is on right now, it's just like I expected to see it happening, you know. So the only thing that I'm, you know, disappointed in is probably what this album or like what's going to happen with the direction of this album. But honestly, it could be a blessing in disguise. I don't know if I wanted to hear a Game album produced fully by
I
Kanye in
was gonna
2020.
say Game never really has a problem finding, dope production. And I think that if Kanye wasn't all the way in it and was like halfway producing his album, we wouldn't want another Nasir out there. You know what I mean? And that's no disrespect. I think Nasir is better than people give it credit for. But again, you could tell like it wasn't full focus mode, right? And I think that if you're gonna get a Kanye that's halfway involved, but is fully over the production, Game is probably gonna make a better album without that Ye involvement. And I do think that Game is one of those people too, though, that if he has more to talk about, that really helps the material too. So I'm
Yeah,
looking forward to documentary 3 still. Hopefully this will actually put a charge in, saying his back, battery in his back, that probably already was there. But I think that we'll get the album sooner without Kanye's involvement than we would with Kanye's involvement.
I think this is a perfect time for Dre to redeem himself after Missionary.
I think so too. But see, what
You
Dre
said he
has
can
to
still.
do as a producer though, and this is what great producers do too. He has to has to let artists be artists as well. You know what I'm saying? Like he has to not just totally take over the album making process. I think to be a little bit hands off and be a little bit more collaborative may help in this era as well. Because what Missionary showed was, yeah, when you got full control, even with Snoop Dogg in the fold, there could still be a miss.
I think if you're gonna have the documentary 3, and we really haven't got an album produced with you with Dre, and it seemed like him and Dre was they're on good terms. There was an interview he had did
Yeah.
like some months ago, like last year, towards the end of last year, and he said I can still call Dre and he'll pick up his phone. They be like, yeah, he called Dre and Dre picked up, and I was like, okay, so I think this is a perfect time for Dre to actually redeem, the stuff after Missionary. We're coming together and doing the documentary 3. I
I
think
think
if
it'll
you
be
want
a
to catch
great thing too. A lot of people
great,
out here saying that Dre washed or whatever, and
nah,
yeah,
with that.
I'll never say that. I'll
Yeah,
never say
but
Dre's washed.
yeah, yeah, I'm not surprised at that Kanye stuff, man. Honestly, it's starting. It's like Kanye. That stuff is like WWE with me, man. It's not real to me, bro. It's just like I said, Kanye is just like I care less. But I was disappointed if that moves the album of what was gonna be for Game back or whatever, because I am anticipating the documentary 3. I didn't like the last album. I like the album. I did like 1992. I did like the documentary 2 and 2.5. I pretty much
I
like
like
a
some things
lot of
on
albums.
Dramatic.
I didn't like Dramatic.
Dramatic has some stuff. It was just too long. It was too much material on it.
I, didn't-
But yeah, I
I
like
did not
some
like.
things on there. Yeah, it has some
I did not.
songs on it. And somebody pointed out in the chat, man, yeah, he was out here trolling Beyonce's mom and all that stuff. Like, yeah, that
Yeah, see, I wouldn't want that album. That's that Kanye that pulling for the controversial stuff. Kanye says a lot of stuff in records and stuff like that. And I don't want that from Game. If you're gonna have it a documentary 3, that's kind of not like how the documentary albums were centered around for the most part. I
Yeah.
wouldn't want that, you know. So like it's probably like I said, it's probably a blessing in disguise that he doesn't do that with Kanye, man. Because even with that influence from Kanye and how that's gonna go, I don't think that would have been good.
Well, one more Kanye thing, and then we can move on to Coachella and ride out. What do you think about his notion that he believes that the music industry is trying to systemically erase his accomplishments and prop up Kendrick in its place?
He's doing that on his own. It has nothing to do with Kendrick. That's just him feeding more stuff into jealousy about his jealousy that he already proclaimed for Kendrick. Kanye's doing it to himself.
Kanye's
And
isolating
that's
himself right now. I
yeah, he's
mean,
absolutely
when we talk about this whole game situation, like the amount of allies are diminishing, unfortunately. Pusha T was riding for a moment. Um, I don't know what Sci High is with it, but that's it's a whole different thing. The game was, saying ride with, Ye through all of these things. And man, to break the plate with him, that's wild to me, man. Because Game's even giving Kanye credit for the fact that the Dream song that Kanye produced for him back in the day was the song that Dr. Dre heard that made him say, okay, well, let's get your album together. That's what got Dr. Dre up and ready to make the documentary. So, this is something, like you said, these guys go way back. You know what I'm saying? It's a long-standing, relationship. And to publicly trash that unnecessarily, man, that's somebody who's been riding with you through the red hats and the Make America Great Again, everything. The Trump visits and all of that.
I don't feel
Coachella.
no. I'm not sorry for this guy. Yeah.
There's a lot going on in Coachella, man. I saw some highlights from when Queen Latifah went out there on stage with Megan Thee
That was
Stallion performing why it was an incredible moment. Chris Brown's out there, Coachella. Wiz Khalifa's out there, Coachella. Glorilla's big star out there right now. What are you hearing from the people who were at Coachella and just some of the highlights, if you will?
I don't know anybody who went.
Mhm.
But as far as like I took notes on like all the performances and clips that I seen and everything. It was some dope stuff. The most things that I've seen was around Missy,
Mhm.
Meg the Stallion, LL Cool J. That performance was crazy. And then I seen Travis Scott, and he performed with my alma mater's band, the March 100 from FAMU, and Jackson State's band um, on that performance. So, like from what I seen, all right, the LL performance was dope. Meg the Stallion brought out Queen Latifah. Queen Latifah actually came out and did a verse of her joint that she did on the last project, that Plan B joint, and then she did UNITY. She brought out Victoria Monet, Sierra, and I seen that she had some mic issues or whatever, but she held that performance down. I seen some stuff about T-Pain. He took him back and did his catalog, and he flipped some stuff. I think he did one of his records and meshed it with one of the Kendrick records. I think it was like TV Off or something like that. T-Pain is a great performer, man. I
Great
seen that. He
performance.
held that down. Travis Scott, he did his thing. He returned and debuted new music. I think he debuted like 2 new songs. I know he's working on another like uh compilation album. I think it's another like Cactus Jack album, and I think he's probably working on another solo album. So we don't know really what those 2 songs are gonna be on, but yeah, he killed it. Brought out the marching bands and that. I seen 3 6 Mafia was there. They actually took pictures together with everybody for
Yeah.
this, but they brought
DJ
out
Pussy
yeah, yeah. MGK, Travis Barker, and Wiz Khalifa. You know what I'm saying? So that was dope.
Mm.
Um, Glorilla performance, she held it down. That Mustard performance was dope. He brought out Tyga, 2 Chains, YG, Big Sean, Roddy Rich, and LMA and Ty Dolla Sign.
Hip
And
hop
one of
is
the
representing at
yeah,
Coachella.
yeah, and one of the biggest performances that I seen, I was talked about first before all the rest of this was Missy Elliott.
Yeah.
Because it came out the Transformers costume. She really took people back to her old stuff and the old imagery of how the music videos used to look, and it went all the way up to like the records like past that Dutch and working stuff like that. But she really was performing those, those old records like She's a Bitch and things like that. It was showing the effort. I remember that video, that like the Mega Man costumes and stuff like that. So she really took people back to the essence of what made her solidified in her space. So hip hop really held it down for this past weekend at Coachella. It was
My
crazy.
man thoughts in the super chat says, it says, Common seems like a good dude. I wonder if they're still close. Yeah, he's kind of,
Bad about
you ain't
Common.
gonna really go all out on Common, but you could tell they
Yeah,
aren't really close. But I think that he respects Common for what Common means to Chicago, it means to his career, and all of that. But I don't think they will ever have a full out, public spat. I don't see that. Missy. Oh yeah. The Mega Man that was Sock It To Me, but the She's a Bitch
yeah.
video was crazy. But yeah,
She's a
man.
bitch. Bald head. It was like the black ball head joint
Mhm.
on the She's a Bitch. Yeah,
I'm so glad that Missy is finally getting her just due, because I think for a long time, just based on what how different she was and what people expected from female MCs, she didn't really get put in these conversations. And I know Billboard just put out a list where Missy was number 2, whereas I don't think she'd be that high. I'm glad that Missy is getting her proper just due, because what she means to hip hop and what she means to the music that was coming out at that time. You remove Missy and Timbaland and their impact, things look way different. And she needs to be, credited for that. And the fact that she's still going out there and putting on these performances that are having people wowed by how creative they are, it's just a testament to her as a creative. Like, I don't even look at Missy as a rapper. I look at Missy as just a straight up creative, and a creative that we needed at that time and we still need, with the sound effects, her
yeah,
approach to making music, like even what she did with the music videos, what her and Hype Williams made together, what her and Dave Myers made together. Like, you knew that you were going to get something different when you heard a Missy album, when you saw a Missy music video. Again, like we were just talking about with Mystical and Juvenile, just for some MCs and artists, you're going to get bars. You're going to get somebody to make you think in a different way that you weren't thinking before. But with her, it was about the approach. I knew I was going to hear a sound that I never heard before, or visually see something on screen that I never saw before. You know what I'm saying? And as a creative, man, Missy is just off the charts with it. And I'm glad she is finally, getting those level of flowers. I do think the fact that Wayne gave her flowers and Nicki Minaj and people like that really helped generations after really appreciate, what Missy brought to the table.
I always make a case for Missy. I feel like Missy, if there's one thing that we have to give Missy for, she knows how to make a complete song. Like whether it's just like from her on the production end or her on the artist side, like she knows how to craft a song from beginning to end.
Oh yeah.
Like that's something that she really gets credit for. That I really have to give her credit for, because I got to see Missy perform, and this was the
Mm.
time when she had Missy So Addictive. So this is like Minuteman and Get Your Freak On. That was that. I think that was the album with that on
Lick
it.
shots. Yeah, yeah.
So
How
I
do
got
you
the
rank Missy's albums?
I think Missy albums, like I like Super Duper Fly. I did like Miss E So Addictive. I didn't really listen to Missy albums in full after that. Like I just started appreciating a lot of singles and certain songs that she had with people. But her later albums, I didn't really go. Actually, that album that had the joint, the cookbook, I think the cookbook actually was pretty dope. But um I stopped liking like the Missy stuff when it started to get into that bag of like when she did the record with Fat Man Scoop or whatever, that high energy, fast dancing music. It was
Yeah.
cool. It's great for hip hop. It's great for the dance culture and stuff like that. But I'm not riding around bumping that at that time. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
So that's when I stopped listening to those type of albums. But yeah, man, I still got Super Duper Fly in there on disc. Like that's the CD I still have. You know, and
it's crazy because I'm with you. I think I would have the cookbook last. I remember when the Real World came out, the one with, She's a Bitch and All of My Grill and all that stuff on there. I remember when that came out, and musically and what her Timbaland was doing, I had never heard anything like that. I thought that was the end all be all of what they were gonna do. And then I felt like on Miss E So Addicted, Tim took the production to another level in some certain ways. But as far as complete album, damn man, it's hard, man, because all of them are quality.
Yeah.
I might say I might go Miss shit. I might go Miss E So Addictive #1. I really love Under Construction because of what they did from a hip hop aesthetic. I think if we talk about like rap albums, I think Under Construction is the one for her.
Look at album, was that after Under Construction? Was it Cookbook?
Cookbook was right after Under Construction. Under Construction was the one with Working on there. And it had record with Ludacris. Shit, what's the name of that song? I'm tripping. I hear it. You know what I'm talking about.
She had 1 Minute Man with Ludacris, and I was on Miss.
Well, 1 Minute Man was on Miss E So Addictive. I'm talking about Gossip Folks. Gossip Folks. Yeah. So Under Construction had Bring the Pain. Actually, Goes to the Floor was hard. The intro. They had Bring the Pain with Method Man. Had Gossip Folks with Luda. Had Work It. Had Back in the Day with Jay. Had Funky Fresh, Just to Impress, Ready to Party with Miss J. Pussycat was on there. Nothing Out There for Me with Beyonce was on there. Slide. It kind of waned off as the album went on. I really love that song. Play That Beat. That beat was crazy. They got down on Play That Beat and Ain't It Funny. So, all right, looking at these albums though, I might go Miss E So Addictive #1. I might go. Jeez, man, all of them are so close. I might go Under Construction #2, Real World, Super Duper Fly.
Super Fly? Well, I ain't gonna lie, I like the Real World too. That had the big that I played.
The Real World's fire. The Real World starts off had Beat Biters, had that Busta Rhymes song with Eminem, had All of My Grill, had Hot Boys on there, Dangerous Mouse with Redman, they killed that. That Mr. DJ song with Lady Shaw was hard. Checking For You with Lil' Kim. I remember that Stickin' Chicken song with Aaliyah. That song was dope too. But see, I'm looking at these albums, and She's a Bitch toward the end of the album, and Crazy Feelings with Beyonce closed it out. But I do notice that her albums are very top heavy. It's like they start off with bangers, 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 and then they kind of like wane off at the end. I don't know, man. They're all quality. I would give all of these albums around 4. The one I would give 4.5 would probably be Miss E So Addictive, maybe. But all of these are like 4 mic albums, man. Yeah, Miss E So Addictive is the best one. I'm looking at this track list. I remember Dog and Heat with Redman and Method Man. That was hard. Then you got 1 Minute Man. Then you got Lick Shots. Then you got Get Your Freak On. Then you got Scream. Song was hard. Old School Joint. That was hard. Take Away with Genuine. For My People with E. Then you got What You Gonna Do with Timbaland. That song was hard. Step Off was hard. Ecstasy was probably the weakest song on there, and then Slap was on there. Yeah, that's the best one to me.
Yeah, I had that album.
Mm-hmm.
I have Missy albums. I have is Missy So Addictive and Super Duper Fly.
Super Duper Fly was the shit. And I just think with Super Duper Fly though, they made it in a week. At least that's what they said, and I think they just improved on their model. Like, you know what I'm saying, every time out.
Someone stepped up. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, they kept stepping up. Yeah, man. What else happened at Coachella? Was Missy
Man,
the biggest highlight?
the what? The biggest highlight?
Well,
What you said?
yeah, was Missy the biggest highlight, or was it Travis? Because Travis is kind of returning the stage. Because I mean, we have short memories here in the social media world. Like a couple of years ago, they were talking like Travis can't perform live ever again. They were talking about casting him out into the metaverse for performances
Oh man,
because of
Travis
what
been
happened.
active. He's been on a few festivals since then. I mean, he's
Yeah,
closed. He's been a closer in a few Rolling Louds. Since then, you know, he dropped Utopia. Utopia was one of the biggest selling 2020 albums. Um, and the fact that he's dropping new music, like he's been outside. He's been with the WWE, training for wrestling, doing stuff. He's like a rock star, man. How Travis moves as an artist. He's like on
I
some
think
rock
he's
star
the best
stuff.
performer of his era. Do you think
Oh, he's a great
it's
performer. I
either
got to
him or
see him
Kendrick?
3 times.
It's either him or Kendrick. So you agree?
They're not comparable, but yeah, they're not comparable. I think as far as the thought process of what Kendrick put into his performances, as far as concepts and execution, and not having those background vocals and really be on point and everything about the set is amazing for a performer. So yes, I agree with you that Kendrick is one of the best performers of this generation. But with Travis Scott, it's kind of like he's a rock star. Like I got to see him do some amazing things, man. Like I've been to some Rolling Louds and he's opened up the pit and people are mosh pitting and he's jumping in the crowd and crowd surfing and he does some amazing things, man. He's a great performer. His transitions and even how he put together his sets. You know what I'm saying? I went to go see him when he did the Astro World tour, and
Shit.
the way they had a roller coaster that went throughout the thing, and fans were riding the roller coaster as he performed. It was kind of crazy, and it's in the air. Like it's air, bro. Like his performances, like I seen a Rolling Loud in LA. He was performing like on the stand of a helicopter up in the air. You know what I'm saying? Like he does rock star stuff, and like I vouch that he's one of the greatest performers of this generation because I got to see this man 3 times, and yeah,
What
man,
was your
he's
favorite song that he performed like live? Like when you get that, energy live.
well, he take in his performances, he takes you through like
Yeah.
it's like a story of his career a little bit because he has like Birds in the Trap Scene, McKnight, and Rodeo, and he takes you through those records. But then when he gets into Astro World, that's like crazy of his own with the flows and the dips of that album because it starts off heavy, then it goes to this mellow thing, starts back up and gets real Houston. So Astro World was great, and then when you listen to Utopia, it's like an extension of it, but it's a different, darker sound. It's I don't know, man. Like, all right, one of the dopest things I got to see was one of the ones that one of his most popular ones is when he performed Goosebumps or
Yeah.
Butterfly Effect because of the visuals that he do with it. But then I also like when he performs Love Galore, which is a scissor joint, because it's a more like slow joint and they put the effects on the mic and he's singing it and it sounds just like the record, but SZA's not there. I would love to see him perform it together, but when it goes a SZA part and he puts a mic out and the whole crowd is singing that shit from word, and they don't miss a point on still the vibe of that album with the set of everything, it was amazing. And then I like when he plays that record from Astro World, that Stop Trying to Be God record. And that
Yeah.
and then the other record that Rest in Peace to Pimp C Tonight We Take It Slowly. Like that record, when he
Yeah.
performs those and the visuals that he have and he's paying homage to like DJ Screw and all them in the back, like that's he
You're gonna make me go
I
listen to Astro World, man.
I'm
I love
for
Astro World.
man because Astro World is one of my favorite albums of the 2020s. I
Period. I
listened to it from
remember when
beginning to end. The
I
vibe
heard,
that
yeah, 2018, man. I remember when I heard Astro World for the first. I mean, it was like we were waiting on it, right? And I'm playing stargazing at the highest volume. Like that stargazing, in my opinion, is one of the strongest
yeah,
intro songs
yeah,
ever. Easily of the 2000s or whatever, the 2010s. And every song that I was hearing, I was picturing him on stage doing it. Like you said, stop trying to be God, or fuck the club up. Like
yep,
this
yeah,
just the energy. But I love rodeo too. You know what I'm saying? Like I love the record with him and Quavo, This Side. And the Brian McKnight album, the Birds sing Brian McKnight, where you got Goosebumps on there. You got the song with Kid Cudi on there, All Through the Late Night. Like every album, he has bangers, and he
Yeah,
has songs that you know are gonna go live. And when he hits that stage, man, I think he's
yeah,
the best performer of his era.
yeah. He's an
Because
artist, man. He's not really a rapper. He's just like an overall artist. Like I remember watching a documentary on the Astro World stuff, and they were showing how he was making that album. It was just him and his engineer locked in. They was producing their own records, and they in a room performing it. And it's like all his albums are like made for being performed in those big.
exactly.
You know what I'm saying? Like they're made to be in those big spaces. You know, and like I said, I vouch for him as giving me one of the best albums of 2020 with Astro World. And like I said, Birds in the Trap, Scene McKnight, Rodeo, even what was it, the days leading up to Rodeo, whatever. I think it was a mixtape or EP or
Hmm.
something. That was fire.
Days
You
Before the
know,
Rodeo. I mean,
yeah,
because
they,
Mama Cena's on there. Rest in
yeah,
peace to Tommy Kwan, man. Like Travis got a catalog,
yeah,
and I wasn't huge on Utopia, but Utopia got some moments. That Fiend song, crazy,
yep,
crazy. Goosebumps was the shit though. I mean, still is. I'm trying to think, man. Like on the rodeo, I even like Honcho Jack. Yeah, it's
yeah.
just me. I think that him and Quavo are very underrated combination. I don't know if that chemistry's still there, but I was hoping that they were going to do that, and then we ended up getting the Unkin Few. And I guess the timing of that was good. But I remember the first time I heard Travis, it was on uh, Upper Echelon. It's the first Travis song I heard.
Mhm.
2 Chainz and Ti,
Yep.
incredible
Same.
stuff. Yeah, but
Yeah,
yeah,
man.
man, he probably was the highlight of Coachella, and it's good to
Well,
see
I don't
Travis.
know. That was a lot of big moments, man. Because that LL performance is nothing to sleep on. Like he came, like the dance and everything he performed is classics. Mama said "knock you out" and stuff like that. Like LL still
LL's
showed
a
he
great
could.
performer.
Yeah,
We don't talk about LL as a performer enough, man. Like he has the voice, he has the stage presence, he has the songs. That's the big thing about being a great performer in hip hop too. You have to have the songs that hit the stage in that way, and that's why I do think that Travis has an advantage over many of his contemporaries because his songs are made for the stage. I think the LL songs were produced and made for the stage in that way.
you know he LL always gave energy when he was in that bag, and he embodied whatever vibe it was on. If he was making a record for the ladies, he set the vibe for that. But when
Mhm.
he's in mode where he's really rapping or whatever, he sets a vibe for that too. So he's always been a energy that brought. I mean, he always brought an energy to the performance of the records. Even when you look at you know the performances of like his old stuff from the 80s. Like those records is always aggressive in sound. It was always like loud
And
and kind of yeah,
yeah,
it kind of was made for that. Now, when you look at it and perform them now, it still slaps. So yeah, he was definitely a highlight of Coachella. Of course, Meg's a highlight of Coachella because she brought out Queen Latifah, man, and that's pretty big. We were, that female hip hop camaraderie with the legends and the newer artists. We see a handful of times, but it's always dope. And Queen Latifah always shows love to the young artists. I remember she came out with Cardi at Summer Jam one time. So see,
yeah.
she's doing it for Meg, like how she shows love to the younger female artists is dope. I think Queen Latifah is another one that should get credit for not only what she did as a female rap artist, but also who she's ushered into the game, like Naughty by Nature, and then what she's
Yeah,
done with her and Shakim with Flavor Unit and what they did in music and movies and television, and making that transition very early before a lot of rappers seen it was a bag and that her being on Living Single and Set It Off and stuff and what that transpired to like some of these kids of this generation wouldn't even know Queen Latifah was a rapper. They'll just associate her with being a actress or whatnot. So shout out to Queen Latifah for coming out and performing with Meg.
and still having her bars intact. You know what I'm saying? And yeah, I mean, even with all of the things that she's done outside of music, she's always intact as a performer. And even when she gives like a guest featured verse on something, like, you know what I'm saying? Like, she's always there. What was I gonna say before we get out of here? Yeah, LL's a top 10 performer in
Yeah.
my mind. You know, straight up. It's a we can have that conversation as greatest performers, but I do think that the music matters when we talk about performers. I mean, you have people like DMX who are able to kind of just bring out that raw energy, you know, and the tracks really don't matter because I think he kind of stood on his own even outside of the tracks and the production. You know,
Mhm.
his vocals gave the energy. Like you look at him performing something like a Rough Riders anthem and then jumping into a prayer and stuff like that. Like, yeah, X was a one of one. I would, if I had to choose between the two, I might pick X as a performer over Buster. I might. I don't know. I got to think about that.
That's two different energies, though.
It is. It is.
It's
But if I
energies.
had to make a list, I
Yeah,
might
like X is
give.
he has an intimate connection with his fans. So he's like a
Yeah,
rapper. You seeing grown men cry when he does his prayer and stuff. And it's like and that was he had a different type of connection with his fan base when he performed. You know, I got to see X live, so I know exactly what it
yeah,
was. So, you know, the connection that he had with his fan base, that's what I'll put over Buster. But Buster's no slouch as far as his energy he brings with
yeah.
Buster will perform a medley of his hits and kill it, and nobody would want to go after him to perform after that.
I
And you don't
mean,
want to follow up Buster after him, and Spliff does that, you know.
when Q-Tip brought out Busta Rhymes at Brooklyn Bowl, I mean, you can look it up on YouTube to do
Mhm.
scenario, and you know, they didn't know Busta was in the building, and when Busta came in and did that verse, man, like the whole place erupted. Like you said, the energy, man, and his technical proficiencies. And I will say this, like Busta has a gift when it comes to his voice. Like I think he has one of the most unique rap voices, whether people love the voice or not, but he has a voice that you can't really duplicate on tracks. Like he has nobody could do that hook for victory that Busta did. Like you can't vocally execute on that. Like he has a gift with that, and that translates live. I think that's one thing that a great live performer in hip hop needs is a great voice, and that helps you a lot.
Definitely,
And I think
definitely.
LL Cool J has a very underrated rap voice for real.
Yeah, man. And no, you know, I wouldn't give this to them as solo artists, but when they perform together as a duo, I think Meth and Red does very great as
Oh, of
performers when
course.
they're doing their when they're doing their duo thing. It reminds me of looking at backstage and seeing them. They were like the rappers that was jumping in the crowd and doing all the wild stuff too. So yeah, that energy with Meth
Incredible.
and Red together was dope too.
They
Yeah, man.
have they
Right, right.
have some of the best chemistry. I think Red and Meth have the best chemistry in hip hop. It's between them and the chemistry that Styles and Jada have is ridiculous too. But
Well,
that's different. That's
as
different.
performers,
Yeah,
as
as
performers.
performers,
I
it's Meth
think
and Red.
I think Busta Rhymes and Spliff has the best chemistry.
Well, yeah, that's a little different. I mean, because Spliff
Busta
is a
and
hype
Spliff is
man, whereas Red and Meth are a group.
yeah.
Yeah.
The chemistry with them two on stage as performers is amazing. Um, yeah, Spliff been holding
But
it
the thing
down.
is just amazing with Meth and Red is the fact that they belong to two totally different crews. And they kind of just do this on the side. You know what I'm saying? Like, imagine if they were actually really a group for real and they came up together and all of that. Like, they have two totally different crews and they have this chemistry that is just effortless. It's really impressive.
Yeah,
That's
man.
why
The
that's what I kind of look at with, you know, and I'm not saying Quavo and Travis or Redman and Method Man, but I do think that they have amazing chemistry for people who aren't even in the same crew or even grew up anywhere near each other.
yeah, it's a voice inflection. They have the contrast in voice, and it just works well over those records that Travis does music on. You know, his production is kind of ahead of his time too, and I don't think he gets credit for that. Like that sound
Agreed.
of that world. I feel like every album he reinvents a different sound that some of these
Yeah.
rappers are sort of kind of adopting in a way to
Yep.
try to rap over. So yeah, man. But Coachella, man, a lot of hip hop artists held it down for Coachella. I love that Mustard DJ said he brought out all those artists. So I hope that's a selling point because he just was added to the Kendrick and SZA tour, and I hope that's a selling point and something that people can look forward to when he does his DJ set, that they can see those special guests, and that will probably help. I mean, they said that he sold out the majority of his tickets of the concert already with the GNX tour. So I think it's
Yeah.
only like 2 or 3 cities that haven't sold out yet, but having Mustard on there and knowing he can bring out those special guests, whatever, is something that people could look forward to as well. So
Yeah.
yeah,
He will. Well, ticket sales are getting hit by the economy. They said maybe what was that, 50% of the Coachella attendees basically were on payment plans.
that doesn't sound crazy to me though. I don't think that's due to a hit. I think it's due to convenience. And
Yeah.
that's one thing about these music festivals that appeal more than concerts. Because these music festivals will be like $399.99 for general admission. But if you want to do general plus, or if you want to do VIP or VIP plus, they may cost more. But the appeal to it is they have these payment plans and they give it early. Like if you lock in right now, then you get a discount rate, or you'll get a longer time to pay for whatever. It's like they have it designed where they want you to come. They're welcoming you and giving you the best option possible for you to come to these festivals, right?
So it's no excuse. All right.
For a concert, you're looking at Kendrick tickets, and I'm using Kendrick as an example because he's like the newest tour that's coming this year. And you look at his individual tickets, and for decent seats, because he's doing stadiums, are going to be like 500 and something, right? For good seats, from 400 something range to 500 something range. Then you have to worry about the Ticketmaster fees. They do bullshit like a convenience fee. What is the convenience in this? You're the only people I can get this through because we can't go somewhere to pay for these tickets.
Right.
Unless you live in that city and they have a box office thing, and then when you go to box office, they even hit you with fees.
Yeah.
So it's like all the fees on it will make that $500 something dollar ticket be like a damn near $600, almost $700 ticket with everything. Then you, depending if you're flying out to that son bitch, like you have to take the plane and hotel stay. Like the convenience of that for a concert versus festivals and the experience around that, you're doing that in a payment plan and able to see tons of artists in a
Yeah.
2-day period, as opposed to going to
It
see
makes
one
more sense.
artist. Yeah, as opposed to seeing one artist and a couple of openers or whatever for with all the hidden fees, and it's just for that one night only. The experience is not the same, bro. Like I'm thinking about Beyonce just went on tour last year. She's going on tour this year. Then you have the Kendrick one. Then you got Chris Brown. Like with today's economy, like in order to go see the artist that you want, you really have to be kind of like in a good space financially because it's not conducive to the fans. It's not conducive to the regular average American living wage or whatever to go see their favorite artists. And for some of them, for these festivals, it's a little bit more convenient. They work with them. They have these payment plans, have that. So when I see that percentage, I was like, that doesn't sound crazy. Coachella alone is what, like a 2-week festival? So to have that and being able to experience something for that, it's like it's amazing. Rolling Loud has one of the best payment plan things, like them, and then they go through all the same companies like Front Gate. So it's like Rolling Loud, Lovers and Friends, all of them, they go through the same thing, and they have these things and the merch deals and the things. It's so many things that they do that caters to uh, a person who wants to attend a festival, as opposed to going to see just one or two artists that's on a ticket, man, with all these fees and stuff that's being imposed on ticket sales and everything. I, I'm starting to get it. I don't watch wrestling consistently, right? But I wanted to go to WrestleMania because I seen that it's going to be in Las Vegas, and I was just looking at the ticket sales for that for the 2-day event, and I'm like, how are people, the average American, able to go attend something like that, to go see these once in a lifetime things for them? And it's just like, it sucks, man, that the fans, the real core fans, are not able to see their artists live because of the type of ticket sales, and then not to mention the resale stuff, like Ticketmaster resale tickets is ridiculous. They need to put a certain amount of a cap on that. And if I do anything resale, I'm going to StubHub. At least I
Exactly.
know they're going to be reasonable. They have a threshold what they'll allow resellers to go over. But yeah, man, with today's economy and trying to convince people to pay that money to go see those one or two artists, man, you really have to be in a good financial space to see these people now, man. Like
It's got to
concert.
be that important to you, and it's like, and then when you see some performers not taking the performance serious, it's like it's a slap in the face to the fans because
Yeah,
people go through a lot to even go
exactly.
out and see you. You know what I'm saying? So, all
Yeah,
right,
exactly.
well, did we cover everything? I think so.
Um, I mean, I know people might think it sounds crazy for a payment plan for a festival, but that's kind of always the appeal for festivals. Like,
Yeah,
we're not asking you to pay all that up front. They want people to come. They want people to support. So they make it convenient. They make it convenient for that. So I think, man, let's get with the times, man. You know, we're in a world where you have things like Afterpay, Klarna, and things like that, where people are not in shop, where people are not even paying for things such as clothes or tennis shoes. People are put payment plans on Jordans and shit because they don't want it. They might have it and don't want to pay it. Like the times that we have gotten to with these third party payment things like Cash App, Zelle, all that stuff, or even how we make purchases like a Klarna and a Firm and all that stuff. People is like, I feel like it's smart for the people who created that and are partnering with these people to use it because everybody ain't got it like that. Everybody ain't well off. Like I look at it every day as I'm grateful for being able to be in a place that I am, but I have to look at it. That's not the majority of Americans today, bro. Like, and the ones that cater to that and make it a convenience for that, they're always gonna win.
yeah,
They're always gonna win.
yeah, for
I
sure.
think one last point, like for example, like Kendrick performing at the Super Bowl, and people were talking about the reactions of that, and they have it pan into people and their reactions, and it's like Stoneface. But you have to remember who's the amount of people you think could afford to go to the Super Bowl to go even see that.
Exactly. Exactly.
So
It's not going to be the rowdy audience for sure.
yeah.
All right, man. We had a great conversation, man. Hit like and subscribe, everybody. And yeah, if there's anything that you think that we should actually cover, hit that in the comment section. And we got some new music coming out soon.
Oh yeah, new single by Woo. Woo Griselda, Method Man kills his verse on there. I think they dropped that at sometime last week.
Hmm.
Like I said, Travis Scott previewed a couple new tracks on at Coachella. Clips and Pharrell,
Hmm.
they previewed a record. And no, with paper with the payment plan soup, there's not interest rates on them. They just give you a time span to pay a certain amount per month leading up to the concert, and you paid in full. And yeah,
For your
it's not
convenience.
great. There's no hidden fees with that. They just make it to where you don't pay it all up front, you just pay it month by month. And if you
Mm.
miss a payment, they'll just give you all your money back and be like, hey, whatever. But yeah, that's the cool thing about festivals.
All right, man. Hit like and subscribe, everybody, man. I appreciate your insight, sir. And we'll holler at
Sure.
y'all next week. Yes, sir.